I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher,
Present.
Councilmember DeBala,
Present.
Councilmember Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens,
Present.
Councilmember Honzak,
Present.
Councilmember Small.
Indeed.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We have a pretty packed agenda today. Yeah, we do. We'll start this evening with two proclamations. One is in recognition of National Public Works Week, which is May the 19th through the 25th. And the second is in proclamation of May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day. We're joined by a number of our officers who will be coming up and taking a bit of a photo op with us later. We will also have a number of items in our voting session tonight. The first is the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 tax rates. The second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 stormwater management budget. The second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 budget. The single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to sign a contract with Human Circuit for technical services for city TV. A single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with UKG for implementation of Human Resources Information System. And a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a memorandum of agreement between the Maryland Office of Administrative Hearings and the City of Tacoma Park to provide an administrative law judge or retired judge to serve on disciplinary panels convened under the Maryland Police Accountability Act. We will then have two work sessions this evening. The first is a wrap-up of the 2024 legislative session and discussion of legislative priorities to submit to the Maryland Municipal League. The second is a discussion of the FY 2026 budget policy resolution. In terms of upcoming agenda items, on Wednesday, May the 22nd, we will have a special meeting with the SHA administrator. Just as a reminder, we will start with public comments on SHA-related matters. Public comments are limited to 30 minutes, up to 30 minutes. So we're asking for the public who would like to comment on SHA items to please sign up in advance. Comments are limited to 3 minutes each. Advance sign-up is required. Sign-up has to happen before 5 p.m. on the day of the meeting, and you can request to sign up by email at clerk@tacomaparkmd.gov. We will also have the second item on that agenda will be council priorities meeting with the Maryland Department of Transportation SHA Administrator William Pines. And then we will have a voting session that evening on resolution authorizing submittal of the 2025 legislative action request to the Maryland Municipal League. The next item, just as a reminder for folks, I missed this. On Tuesday, this Tuesday, May the 21st, we will have a library project topping off ceremony. It's going to be at 3 o'clock, and it will be an opportunity for folks to sign the topping off beam. On Monday, May the 27th is Memorial Day. City offices and facilities will be closed Sunday and Monday for the Memorial Day holiday. On Wednesday, May the 29th, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We will have a voting session on, I think this is a due. I'm just trying to triple check. 21st. Oh, I think I've already done this. Establishing budget priorities. And then we will have a work session, administrative regulations, addressing processes to request, evaluate, and advance traffic calming and sidewalk installations, and a quarterly financial report for the third quarter, as well as FY 2024 budget amendment number 4. On June the 5th, council will meet at 7:30. We will start with for the record, a Gun Violence Awareness Day, which is June 7th proclamation. Voting session, a first reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 4, as well as 2 work sessions, a library construction project update, as well as a discussion of council action on Resolution 2015-32. That's the resolution that set the policy for the new sidewalk design and installation process. And just keep in mind, for everyone, that prior week we will discuss the administrative regulations that address processes to request, evaluate, and advance traffic calming. So we'll be discussing that evening any modifications that we need to make to the process. And then lastly, on Wednesday, June the 12th, the council will meet at 7:30. We will have a voting session, a second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 4, single reading ordinance awarding a grant for summer lunch and enrichment services, council action on resolution 2015/32, and then we'll have 2 work sessions, administrative regulation regarding the use of certain public facilities, and board and committee appointments recommendations. So with that, we're going to move on to our proclamations for this evening. All right. Let's start with the proclamation recognizing National Public Works Week, May 19th through the 25th, 2024. Whereas public works services provided in our community are an integral part of our residents' everyday lives. And whereas the support of an understanding and informative citizenry is vital to the efficient operations of public works systems and programs such as solid waste collection, recycling, street and right-of-way maintenance, stormwater management, playground safety, leaf collection, protection of the urban tree canopy, maintenance of city gardens, facility maintenance and repair of city equipment, and sustainability efforts in design, procurement, and outreach. And whereas the health, safety, comfort, and quality of life of this community greatly depends upon these services. And whereas the quality and effectiveness of these programs, as well as their planning, design, and implementation, is vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of public works employees. And whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by the people's understanding of the importance of the work they perform. And whereas the year 2024 marks the 64th annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, hereby proclaim the week of May the 19th through the 25th, 2024, as Public Works Week in the City of Tacoma Park. And on behalf of the City Council, thank all Public Works Department's employees and their dedicated service to the city. And I urge Tacoma Park residents and community organizations to acquaint themselves with the services provided by our Public Works Department and recognize the contributions which each Public Works employee makes every day to the environment and to the health, safety, comfort, and quality of life in our city. So I just want to thank our Public Works staff for all that they do.
Ma'am? Ma'am?
Yes.
I just wanted to echo these sentiments for 2 reasons. One, because they are a joy to meet in person and speak with wherever you have the occasion to do so. But also, there was I've always liked the opportunity for people who are doing whatever there is, including the hardest of laborers, to feel like they have an opportunity to move up and move around and find other things to do career-wise. And I think that there's enough opportunities within the city structure that we have to do that. And that's one of the things that I am hopeful that we continue. And shout out to those guys who have to see me when I bring stuff out late.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Fulcher?
I just want to remind everybody that the Tacoma Park Public Works took 3rd place last year in the 4th of July parade as a performing artist because our Public Works is as special as Tacoma Park is. So.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much, Councilmember Fulcher. And so next, we have a second proclamation. And this proclamation is recognizing National Police Week, which is May the 12th through the 18th, 2024, and Peace Officers Memorial Day, May the 15th, 2024. Whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the City of Tacoma Park Police Department. And whereas the members of the Tacoma Park Police play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the City of Tacoma Park. And whereas it is important that all residents know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agencies, and that members of our law enforcement agencies recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 26,553 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed in the line of duty, and the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved in the wall of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. And whereas 135 officers died in the line of duty in 2023, and 282 new names of fallen heroes, past and present, have been added to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in 2024. And whereas a candlelight vigil honoring the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be conducted on May the 13th during National Peace Week in Washington, D.C. Peace Officers Memorial Day will be observed on May the 15th, 2024. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, hereby call upon all residents of the City of Tacoma Park to observe this week as National Police Week, to commemorate law enforcement officers past and present who, by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities, have rendered a dedicated service to their communities, and in doing so have established for themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all. And to observe May the 15th, 2024, as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of those who, through their courageous deeds, have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their community or have become disabled in the performance of their duty. And let us recognize and pay respect to the survivors of our fallen heroes. So I just want to say thank you so much to all of our officers who protect and serve us every day. I recognize the challenge of the role that you have to protect and serve, especially in today's climate. And I feel so fortunate as the mayor in the City of Tacoma Park to have a police force that is committed to a guardian mentality, to community engagement and community policing, who work every day to make sure that the people in our community know that they are protected, but do so with respect and dignity for everyone. So I'm really grateful that we have the officers that we have. And I just want to check to see if anyone else wants to say anything before we ask the officers to come up so we can take a photo op. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, I'd just like to say that there's a period of time when I was really confused when I was listening to rap music because all of our police were stalwart and kind. And so it's one of those things that's sort of important because the juxtapositions and the distance between the expectations that people have about how they are going to be policed and the actual police that actually operate at least our streets is so stark. And I try to be adamant with everyone that I know that you guys deserve a fair shake because you give people a fair shake. And so I just wanted to say thank you again for that. Good job.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I would like to join the mayor and my colleagues in thanking the officers and the department for all the work that they do for the community. I've had the pleasure of sitting here on the council for a number of years and watched the department change from the warrior model to the guardian model that we are today, and I really see the benefit, and I'm so proud of the people in the department today for the work they put in and their caring approach to policing. I would like to also mention that we are where we are today because of the police management we have now and because of the fine people that are in our department. But we're also here because of the people in the community. And it is so vitally important that the community stay engaged with the police department so that they know what the police department is doing and is able to voice their opinion when they feel that they're uncomfortable with the way things are. And I think that's important, not just because we have a good police department now, but we got to this point because of the community care and involvement. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens and Councilmember Fulcher.
Yeah, I just want to thank our police department again for some of the de-escalation that you've been involved in, particularly with the exhibition driving in the last year. I've been really impressed. And then, you know, not only your responsiveness to some of the negative stuff that happens in the community, but, you know, recently we had an officer appointed as our LGBTQ plus liaison, which I really appreciate because that's a positive thing for our community that our community asked for. And the chief, you know, said it was no problem and he was going to work on it. And now here we are. So thank you.
Great. Well, we have a number of officers here, and we have something that we would like to make sure that there's a copy of the proclamation that you all have available, and come on up and we could take a picture on the stage. Okay, all right. So now we're going to move on to public comments on voting items. So as a reminder, we have a long list of voting items for this evening. Second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 tax rates. Second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 stormwater management budget. Second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 budget. Single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to sign a contract with the Human Circuit for technical services for city TV. Second reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with UKG for implementation of the Human Services Information System. And second reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to sign a memorandum of agreement between the Maryland Office of Administrative Hearings and the city of Tacoma Park to provide an administrative law judge or retired judge to serve on disciplinary panels convened under the Maryland Police Accountability Act. Do we have any public comments on voting items? Seeing none in the room, do we have any? Okay. All right. So then we're going to move on to general public comments. Do we have any general public comments this evening? Give me 1 second, Mary Jane. Let me turn on your mic. Uh-oh. Give me 1 second. There you go.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you all for being here. I started Parents of Special Needs Adults in 2015. And we're an advocate group. We still haven't got enough. It takes a lot of money and effort to become a nonprofit and get money and funds. And I get frustrated because we don't have the money or the funds, and it would be nice if we could become a nonprofit. And I get frustrated because the city gives money to people who don't even live in the city, but yet they don't help us at all. And thank you, Mayor Searcy, for acknowledging I sent my son's resume to you, and thank you, Mr. Siemens, for the letter you wrote. But still, my son is a zombie. You're welcome to come to my house if you think I'm exaggerating. He's all I've got in this world, really. And he's a zombie. And it's driving me crazy, okay? Really, frankly. And I'd like to thank the police department, especially Sergeant Wolf, because I was having a meltdown about 3 weeks ago over the situation. And they came and spoke with me. And I kind of was embarrassed that the police came because I didn't call the police. I called Agent in Disability Services, but the woman point blank says, "We can't help you." I've been told so many times over the years, my son has struggled all his life, and I've been told so many times, "We can't help you." I just can't take it any longer. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry if I'm acting nuts, but hey. And thank you for the people who do care, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jane. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Good evening. My name is Jessica Lindman. I'm from Ward 1, and I'm speaking this evening on behalf of Community Vision for Tacoma. First, I want to thank the city manager and his budget team for having taken the time in the lead up to the budget season to meet with CVT members about the budget and about the process used for coming up with his recommendations this year. This was a very constructive process, and I think it contributed to a clearer understanding of the approach that he was taking this year in his first round with the city, and our understanding of your commitment to making improvements over past years. And we welcome very much the clear signals that the council and the city manager are giving with the start to the budgeting process for next season with the resolution that you're going to be considering later this evening. And looking at the longer term plan that you're unveiling here for returning Tacoma Park to a better state of fiscal health and a better process going forward. However, right now the resolution on budget policy goals that you're going to consider in tonight's work session does not yet mention either the need for enhanced transparency or the need for enhanced communication or having any role for the community in reaching our shared goal of improved fiscal health. Both of those topics have been the subject of many public comments in the past years, and so I hope you will consider making some modest revisions to the resolution to include both of those. The city manager himself has expressed his desire to have a method for hearing from residents who are interested in working with the city and who want to help find opportunities for enhancing revenues and enhancing efficiency. And he's also made some initial strides towards better transparency, which we do appreciate. So we'd like to see the resolution operationalize those commitments and to make them part of your plan going forward. So could the resolution please mention both public communication and public input as elements of the fiscal reform efforts for the coming year? So specifically, I'd like to recommend the resolution be amended to add, be it further resolved that the City Council calls on the city manager to, 1, make regular substantive public reports, whether through the city newsletter or by other effective means, about progress in addressing the activities called for in this resolution, and 2, establish a mechanism for interested residents to provide input and, where applicable, share specialized knowledge or experience with the city manager and staff as they undertake these tasks over the next 8 months. I'll share that text with the clerk for you. And let me also suggest that you authorize and encourage the staff and city manager to bring back to the council ideas and proposals that fall outside of the specific issues that you mentioned in the resolution in case new and different ideas emerge from this initiative. Thank you very much, and thank you for tackling the city's fiscal health in the out years as you move forward and bring us back to the city's values of living within our means and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments?
You need bifocals, I need more. Good evening, Tom Gagliardo, 107 Hodges Lane. First of all, I want to associate myself with remarks made by Sue Katzmiller last week about the failure of the Tacoma Park newsletter to conform with the unanimously adopted resolution 1992-36. That resolution, among other things, directs the staff to, quote, provide factual, accurate information about the city's policies and programs and other issues of concern to residents. On a more positive note, I want to congratulate the city manager and staff for publishing an informative and fact-specific article about the budget in the last issue. We need more of those articles. We deserve them, and your own resolution requires that. I want to draw your attention to something that appeared in the Source of the Spring, an online news source, on May 7th, in which they noted, quote, the Washington Housing Initiative Impact Panel provided $6 million in a mezzanine debt loan to the Montgomery Housing Partnership to refinance 152 units at the Franklin Apartments, which is located just down the street on Maple Avenue. They noted that this financing, in cooperation with a nonprofit owner dedicated to the property's preservation, I want to emphasize the property's preservation, will provide residents with the ability to age in place in a resource-rich neighborhood of Montgomery County. Will that same information appear in the city newsletter? That's a serious question. I know you've adopted the policy not to respond to citizen comments. You should, and whether you do now or later, will that information and more regarding the Franklin appear in the next issue of the city newsletter? Why is this important? Why is this information and sharing this information with a community at large important? Because this is what I read in an email I received just this morning from The Lever, another online news source. Quote, corporate landlords are ramping up their purchases of assets like apartment buildings nationwide. Quote, critics say that such companies encroaching presence in the housing market and their focus on short-term profits and pricing are pricing out first-time homeowners and gentrifying neighborhoods, contributing to an ongoing housing crisis and excluding families from the generational benefit of home ownership. Quote, research demonstrates that corporate landlords file more evictions than small landlords. If you're committed to affordable housing, preserving it, protecting it, as you said throughout the MMPA process, you need to find out what is going on with owners, developers, and those who finance them, and share that information with the community at large. I'm done, one sentence. Housing is the primary economic activity in Tacoma Park. Rapid change is occurring, and those changes present a challenge to you as our elected representatives and to all of us as a progressive community. There are big things happening. There are macro economic forces and political forces in operation, and if you don't get hip, you're going to get steamrolled. I don't want to see you get steamrolled. I've said this many times. Thank you.
Thank
Your success is my success.
Thank you so much.
I'm not concerned about getting steamrolled by them.
Do we have any other general public comments this evening? Okay, we're gonna move on to, no virtual. Okay, we're gonna move on to council comments. We have council comments this evening. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. As always, I will attempt to comport myself with the time and decorum. Sort of what I wanted to talk about today. We have successfully gotten through a primary election, and we have some candidates. It's going to get really interesting around here. We're about to have some elections here that'll certainly get interesting as well. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of things. And I wanted to talk about politics of influence versus the politics of civility. And to be blunt about it, the former is the way Maryland gets down. Other places don't necessarily get down like this, but this is quick and dirty how Maryland gets down, because you have a lot of people who are highly educated and are interested in the government. And so it is important to be able to, and you have term limits and in and outs and lots of different things. And so having relationships becomes immensely important if you were going to have a trajectory of any sort of advancement as a political career. And so a lot of times things don't get done because you are not on the in crowd, or you're not hip to the play, to take Tom's so kindly given word. And so I would just like to say that there is, historically, within the framework of the American consciousness, a different way of doing this. And it is based on civility. And the important thing about it being based on civility is that it's civil, as in there are rules that people are supposed to follow, and then there are requirements that the corpus of the community requires of its actors. And it's why we have a professional staff that operates this government with or without the influence of politics at a base level, so that the lights stay on and everything stays running, and that we can administer some programs. But it also does allow for a extreme lean toward a politics of influence, particularly with the council, because there are a lot of people who have had lots of varied experiences that would like to impart wisdom and knowledge. And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with any of those things. But I would say that it's important to recognize that as we move forward in this new council configuration with a very competent staff and a future that looks bright, that we recognize that it is more important for us to invest in the authority of the staff to be articulate in opposition to and contravention of any bad idea that they get from us, and in order to have the willingness to be professional enough to push back in political situations that are inherently political. Because I think the most important part of this going forward for me is that being political and being politically astute are not the same thing. Being connected and being qualified are not the same thing. And we are not going to assume otherwise while I'm on this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Gibson.
Yes, a couple of upcoming events this coming weekend. On Saturday, invasives removal at Dorothy's Woods from 10:30 to noon. That's in Ward 3. And then on Sunday, Crossroads Community Fair from 10 to 2 on Laurel Avenue. That should be a lot of fun. And then I just wanted to provide a little context in the light of our budget decisions tonight and the resolution going forward. So I, dug around some information, economic information that I think is useful. Our anticipated property tax is 3.84, based on a flat tax rate but increased valuation. The rent stabilization increase was
was 3.4 versus 3.84. And the federal Social Security, SSI, COLA increase was 3.2. So there's a disparity between what people are on Social Security versus what the taxes are. This is a kind of a small number, but our colleagues here, or one of our constituents here, has noted out that over time, this difference between the property tax rate and COLA gets magnified, that from 2001 to 2023, the cumulative increase in retirement income was about 64%, while Tacoma Park property taxes increased 175%. So who's affected by this? There's more than 13% of the city's population are 65 or over, and 50% of the city's housing is single family, so roughly 6 or 7% of the city's residents might be in this category of dependent on federal COLA. I've also noted from Ira Cowler that approximately 400 households in our Tacoma Park may be considered cost burdened and not likely to qualify for the homeowner's tax credit. Part of that has to do with, the restrictions around the homeowner's tax credit. Net worth no more than $200,000, restricted to families with $60,000 or less household income. And lastly, I just want to note that 181 families received the 2023 homeowners property tax credit rebate this year. Again, those are those affected. I think we need to keep those folks in mind as we make decisions about our current budget and as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. I just want to wish everybody a happy belated Mother's Day and happy voting day. I'm enjoying, my oldest child just turned 18 today, so it was a real pleasure to be able to go into, he got to vote in the primaries. So I wish that for everybody. And I want to thank the police force for really going out on a limb and helping to do public safety meetings in new places and new spaces. I know I've mentioned before that they have been willing to bend over and try new things. So last week, in addition to the Spanish public safety meetings that we had already held with them out at Silver Spring International Middle School, we then did a public safety meeting at Essex House with Essex House residents, for which I am very grateful. We had a really good show up of people. And tomorrow night, we'll be having a public safety meeting at Washington Adventist University. Anyone is invited. It's going to be focused on the Ward 5 area in the neighborhood. So again, very grateful to the police force, the city manager for agreeing to do this, and for putting it at Washington Adventist, 7 o'clock. And it will be hybrid in case anyone, and recorded if folks would like to join us in that way. And then lastly, related to the Flower Avenue celebrations, we have a winner for our Youth Inclusion and Diversity sticker contest for Flower Avenue. I'm not going to share the name just yet, but I will say that the top 3 are all from Essex House, which I thought was really a lot of fun. We had folks from across the neighborhood. We had about 100 entries, and they're really beautiful. So I hope folks will show up on June 1st to see the winner. We're getting the stickers printed to give out for the first 200 people who come, and also we're going to be working with the Tacoma Park Cooperative Nursery School to pass out Black-Eyed Susan plants and invitations to the Flower Avenue Together block party all along Flower Avenue. They're going to be passing those out to every building along the whole avenue. So I'm grateful to everybody who's been participating in that. And if you haven't yet participated, you are still very welcome to join. The whole idea is, getting folks together from all different walks of life, from different community groups, and helping us work together towards a sort of shared vision from the southern part of Flower Avenue and the entire neighborhood all the way up to the northern section of the city, where I feel like the city historically hasn't had quite as much attention, and I'd really like to bring everybody in and look towards the future of both the Purple Line and what will be the minor master plan area. So please join us on June 1st if you are able, from 2 to 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember DeBall.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for mentioning Dorothy's Woods, so I didn't have to. The only other thing I wanted to ask if you could share in writing what you read so that I could go over it a little more I didn't catch all those numbers the first time round. And I think other people might like to have it. Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Fulcher?
Thank you. I'm going to brag on my senior daughter who went and worked at the polls for her first time as a full-on election judge. She's done I don't know if you guys are aware of in Montgomery County, we have the youth votes. Is that what it's called? The youth, where we have young people volunteering for a few hours at the polls. But this was her first time pulling that all-day thing, which I think probably lots of people here are familiar with and have done that before. So I was very proud of her. And she did that here over at Tacoma Park Elementary School. In case you saw somebody there walking around with my face, that was my daughter. So today I went to the Metropolitan Washington Area Council of Governments TPB meeting where we voted on the Visualize 2050 plan. And it was a good meeting with good discussion. And we will finalize that next month. There were some pieces that we decided to wait on. For instance, toll lanes on the Wilson Bridge. So I'm excited that we decided to wait on some of that. Tomorrow, I'm going to the MML meeting where I have been voted in, which it's more like I have accepted being a part of the board at large. And, I will miss my oldest receiving an award at Blair in order to do that. But it's that balance that we do where we sometimes miss our 18-year-old's birthday tonight. Just in case people didn't know, Friday is Bike to Work Day. I hope that I see you guys out there. My sons love that day. And also I'll be attending the police banquet and getting to celebrate some more with them this special week. For anybody who enjoys people watching, this Saturday is prom at Blair. It'll be a great Saturday to go out to dinner with a friend in the downtown Silver Spring area. I bet you'll see something good. And then also this Sunday, the Crossroads Community Food Fair is happening in on Laurel Avenue where our farmers market takes place. So I will be there trying to eat all of the food, try to keep up. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take a minute to let people know that our friend and respected library worker, Phil Shapiro, was in the last couple days moved to rehabilitation following his major surgery. And I would encourage people to visit Phil Shapiro on YouTube, not in the hospital or rehab unit, but on YouTube, and see what he's been creating and what he's doing now that he's not sitting in his office right now, but he will be back soon, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Siemens. So first, I want to thank those that that came out tonight and offered comments. Regarding community engagement, there has been a number of edits that have been made to the resolution, and one of which is included an aspect of pre-budget adoption public engagement. So that is something that is already incorporated into the resolution that we'll be discussing tonight. And then also appreciate the thought around communication on the MHP project with the Franklin. I will say, I was a part of some of those conversations. MHP has been engaged with the city in terms of what they have been trying to do in terms of getting the necessary resources for the Franklin. So we were super excited that those resources came to fruition. So I do just want to make sure that folks are aware that not everything that our staff do is projected here or maybe make it to the newsletter, but there's a lot of folks that are working behind the scenes to make sure that the values that this council holds dear are being upheld. So a couple of quick things in terms of the goings-on. I want to thank all of the residents that participated in the Purple Line, University Boulevard, community advisory team meeting that happened. There, thanks to a lot of folks complaining in terms of the number of detours that will be happening over the course of the summer. The Purple Line has agreed to facilitate a number of meetings, and one specifically with the city of Tacoma Park. So we will be keeping everyone abreast of any modifications the city will need to do in light of upcoming street closures and things of that nature as a result of Purple Line construction. Just so that folks know, the plan is to start laying tracks along University Boulevard. So that's exciting, but it's also a little scary thinking about where all those cars are going to go when they're closing the streets.
On the boom.
So with that, just want to hit on a couple of events that have not been discussed just yet. Tomorrow, MML is going to be via Zoom. So yeah, if you need to duck out after you say, yes, I'll do it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I will be there.
Possibly from the Blair Awards ceremony on my Zoom.
On mute, yes. I think that'll be fine. Yep, I will be on the Zoom for MML. Also tomorrow, I believe Meals on Wheels, the Tacoma Park location, is having the spaghetti dinner fundraiser. So grab dinner before the MML at Meals on Wheels. Also, just triple checking the police annual awards banquet. Friday. Yes. So we'll have an opportunity to learn more about our wonderful police force and all the great things that they're doing. Other thing, yes, we've already talked about the Crossroads Food Fair, and I think that those are the, yes, thank you so much. On the 18th, there will be the Long Branch Community Walk for the Purple, in conjunction with the Purple Line and Purple Line Station Walk. That is also on the 18th. And so I think those are all of the big ticket items that'll be happening over the course of the next few days. And so with that, I will turn things over to the city manager, Mr. DeSpirito.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I will add one other item I believe is happening this week. I'm not sure I heard it mentioned. It was the Police Department's Ward 5. Yes, so we've got, this is a Police Department periodically does great outreach in conjunction with the elected representative from any given ward. This time it will be Ward 5. The program will be from 7 to 9 p.m. tomorrow evening, which is May 16th, and that will be conducted at the Washington Adventist University. I don't have the room number, but we have information, I believe, on the website. So the public is welcome to attend that, and this is an opportunity, particularly for the members of residents that reside within the ward, but frankly is a public meeting open to anybody, to come engage with the police department, come tell us things that you think we need to know. What are we doing well? What could we do better? What are you seeing and hearing, and what concerns you with respect to public safety? So we encourage public involvement in these meetings. From the City Clerk's office, I'd like to report the City Council is now recruiting for members to boards and commissions. There are vacancies on the Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs, Emergency Preparedness Committee, Ethics Commission, Grants Review Committee, Recreation Committee, Sustainable Maryland Committee, and the Tree Commission. The deadline for applications is June 3rd, but please don't wait until the last minute to apply if you're interested. More information and the application form are available on the city website. Additionally, recruitment for next year's Youth Council will begin shortly. The application deadline for the Youth Council will be June 28th. City residents aged 18 and under are encouraged to submit designs for the Youth Council's I Voted sticker contest. The winning design will be used for the 2024 city election, and the winner will receive a $100 Amazon gift card. Second and third place designs will each receive a $25 gift card. Details about the contest are available on the city website. And links for all of these items will be included tomorrow in the posted city manager's comments. From Housing and Community Development Department, the Housing Division will be holding a tenant forum to bring renters in the city together to learn about tenant laws, eviction protections, policies the city is considering, and resources for renters. The forum is on May 21st at 6:30 p.m. at the Community Center Auditorium. Housing Initiative Partnership, Montgomery Housing Partnership, Department of Health and Human Services, and others will be staffing tables before and afterwards to provide residents with information about their services. And on Friday, May 31st at 7:30 p.m. in the Community Center Auditorium, please join us for the Capitol Hillbillies. They will raise the roof with a rousing mix of barrel house blues and jug band music from the 1920s and 30s. Don't miss it. This is a free event. From the library, the Friends of the Tacoma Park, Maryland Library are holding a book sale at the library on New Hampshire Avenue on this Saturday, May 18th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Their annual meeting, featuring speaker Mark Maurer, former executive director of the Sentencing Project, will follow on Monday, May 20th at 7 p.m. in the library as well. From the Police Department, Sunday, May 19th is Public Safety Day in Montgomery County. Meet your local officers at the Montgomery County Fairgrounds in Gaithersburg, Maryland from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. There will be police and fire department displays, rides, music, face painting, inflatables, canine displays, a motorcycle skills course, and much more. This is a free event and will be held rain or shine. A link to more information will be included in tomorrow's posted comments. We are pleased to share that the Tacoma Park Police Department Honor Guard team has been given the opportunity to present the colors at a Washington Nationals home game. The game will be against the Minnesota Twins on Tuesday, May 21st, and the Honor Guard team will present colors at approximately 5:30 p.m. From the Recreation Department, a reminder that Action Youth Media will be screening the film developed by the Recreation Department's Filmmakers in Action Teen Camp at the AFI Silver Theater and Cultural Center on May 18th at 11 a.m. as part of their Youth Media Festival. The MoCo Youth Media Festival celebrates the creativity and impact of young filmmakers and artists in the DMV area. And finally, from the City Manager's Office, staff shout out from the Housing and Community Development Department. The HCD Department would like to congratulate Safe Routes to School Coordinator Casey Ann Webley for outstanding work promoting the National Bike Month. Casey Ann did an amazing job with Bike to School Day on May 8th, with 5 schools participating in the Tacoma Park Safe Routes to School program. Tacoma Park Elementary, Piney Branch Elementary, East Silver Spring Elementary, Rolling Terrace Elementary, and Tacoma Park Middle School. National Bike Month continues with the city's Bike to Work Day on Friday, May 17th, with 3 city-sponsored stops which are at Sligo Creek Parkway, Tacoma Bicycle, and the Tacoma Langley Crossroads. That concludes my report this evening, and happy to take any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I do that.
Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. Rob, I just wanted to check in and up on the inner workings of the post-survey, post-suggested traffic study for the New Hampshire Avenue area. People are starting to wonder, and I know some overtures were made to the city about what the process is going to be and what the conclusion is going to be before we get to election stuff. So if we could get an email or something together on that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Great. Okay, seeing no more lights, we're going to move into our voting session for this evening. So the first item on the list is the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 tax rate. Would someone like to move the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 tax rate?
So moved.
All right, I think I heard Councilmember Fulcher moved, Councilmember Hanzak second. Are there any points of discussion? Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fulcher,
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson.
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Small. Mayor Searcy.
Aye. Okay, now we're going to vote to convene as the Stormwater Management Board. Would someone like to move for us to
So
convene?
moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Hanzak. We are now, all those in favor of moving to become the Stormwater Management Board? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, we have changed to the Stormwater Management Board. All right, so the next item up for vote is the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 Stormwater Management Budget. Would someone like to move?
So moved.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Fulcher. Do I have a second? Thank you so much, Councilmember Gibson. Are there any points of discussion for the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 Stormwater Management Budget? Okay, seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fulcher,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Small. Mayor Searcy.
Aye. Okay, we are no longer the Stormwater Management Board. Now we are we're back to our old selves, and we're going to vote on the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 budget. Can I get someone to
So
move?
moved.
Thank you, Councilmember
Second.
Fulcher, and thank you, Councilmember Hanzak. Are there any points of discussion for the second reading ordinance adopting the FY 2025 budget?
Just for the record, there's no change between last week and this week.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions? Okay, perfect. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fulcher,
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Small. Mayor Searcy.
Aye. Okay. And before we move into the next round of voting items, I do just want to pause to say how grateful I am to our team, our leadership team, City Manager DeSpirito, Deputy City Manager Eubanks and Bodak, and all of the senior leaders throughout the city that have worked really tirelessly, Director Chung, on this budget. I appreciate so much that you all heard us, that you made sure that the priorities that we held dear was and the work that we wanted to see done was incorporated, while respecting the fact that we need to manage our money and making sure that we're keeping priorities in terms of contributions to our reserves intact and where we wanted to be in terms of the tax rate. And I know it was hard, and I know it was a difficult thing, especially as we're dealing with the, spend down or draw down of the ARPA funds. But I just want to say thank you so much to all of the staff who worked really hard on this budget to make sure that we were able to get to this point. So thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the next the next item for vote. Single reading ordinance adopting the city manager to sign a contract with Human Circuit for technical services for city TV. Would someone like to move?
So moved.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Fulcher. Thank you so much, Councilmember Gibson. Are there any points of discussion or questions on this item? Councilmember Fulcher? Oh, no? All right. Seeing none, I believe that we need to call a roll on this one. Okay? All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Aye.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson.
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak.
Aye.
Councilmember Small.
Aye.
Mayor Searcy.
Aye. Next item is the single reading ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with UKG for implementation of human services information system. Would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Are there any points of discussion on this one? Councilmember Small.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know my light was on. No, I have none.
Okay. All right. Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fulcher,
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson.
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
Aye.
Councilmember Honzak,
Aye.
Councilmember Small. Mayor Searcy.
Aye. Okay, and the last item on the voting, voting sessions tonight is a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a memorandum of agreement between the Maryland Office of Administrative Hearings and the City of Tacoma Park to provide an administrative law judge or retired judge to serve on disciplinary panels convened under the Maryland Police Accountability Act.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Given that this is a resolution, we're not gonna, we don't need to do a roll call
You
on this
can
one?
do a voice vote if you
Yep.
prefer.
All those in favor of the resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a memorandum agreement between the Maryland Office of Administrative Hearings and the City of Tacoma Park to provide an administrative law judge or retired judge to serve on disciplinary panels convened under the Maryland Police Accountability Act, please say aye. Aye. Do you have any opposed? Any abstain? All right.
There's a reason I moved so quickly on the last, it was a lot to
That's
say.
that's a very, very long title. All right, so now we're going to move into our work session. Actually, I'm just gonna do a quick member check. Would folks like for us to have a break?
Break soon.
Yep. Let's go ahead and take the break before we go into the work session.
Thank you.
Okay, no worries.
That makes sense, because this is gonna be a long.
Let's get this party going.
All right. Party go. Oh, that's
All right. Okay, so now we're going to move into our work sessions. First work session for this evening is a wrap-up of the 2024 legislative session and discussion of legislative priorities to submit to the Maryland Municipal League. We have our Annapolis guru, Ann Scott here, who will be providing us with some detailed information regarding the 2024 legislative session, and also to kind of give us a little bit of prep for the conversation that we're going to have about the legislative priorities that we will need to develop and submit to MML. And that is an item that will ultimately be reflected in everyone's packet for next week for a vote. So with that, I'll turn things over to Ann, who's joined us in person. I'll make sure your mic is on.
I see a light.
Excellent. That means that means it's working.
All right, thank you. It's lovely to be here. The last time I spoke with you all, not in person, I did a sort of a high-level overview of some of the things that happened during the legislative session. Now with a little more than a month of time away from it, a little perspective, a little rest, I can go into as much detail as you want on some things, as much time as you want to give it. But I'm going to just remind you of some highlights of things. And what I did in sort of trying to do a wrap-up report is look at what your priorities were coming into session. You all had, voted on a document with your priorities listed and some examples of the kinds of legislation that the city was interested in. So I wanted to sort of put the legislative issues that the city weighed in on or the city had expressed support for, and in some of those buckets, some of those categories that you had listed coming into the session. So one of your priority areas in your strategic plan is advancing a community of belonging. And so just as examples, there are a couple of bills that passed that will be meaningful to the residents of Takoma Park. One was called the Access to Care Act. And what the bill will do is require the Maryland Health Department to apply for a waiver from the federal government to allow immigrants, regardless of their status, to be able to purchase health care on the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange. So it's a somewhat of a small step in that it'll take a little time to happen, and it'll still have to be people purchasing on their own the health care, but right now they can't. So this will be meaningful for some families for sure. Also, I know that the city has spent a lot of time working on issues related to mental health and crisis services, and what passed this session is a funding mechanism for 988 call centers and services. So you know that a couple of years ago, Maryland and the nation moved to this 988 phone number for crisis intervention, and the state's been setting it up the last year or so, and this might hurt some folks, but hopefully very little, in that the funding mechanism is going to be a quarter per phone line per month to fund 988. So we all fund 911 in that same way. This will be a much smaller version of that to fund 988. So that, again, is going to provide some needed services in the community. One of your goals is to have a fiscally sustainable government. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot that passed. Wasn't even a lot that was introduced to help municipal governments be able to access some additional funding streams or authorization to do some funding. One thing, though, that did happen that was good, that will help some members of the community, is a bill that passed related to the renter's property tax credit, which basically was to create parity in the eligibility and the asset calculations between renters applying for the renter's tax credit and homeowners who can apply for that. So that was something successful, and that one was a bill championed by Delegate Lori Charkoudian from District 20. Making sure that Tacoma Park is an environmentally sustainable community. There was, as there has been for a long time, a lot of bills related to the environment in one way or another. Some environmental justice bills, some bills related to energy, some bills related to a lot of bills related to electric cars, things like that. So a couple of the bills that passed include one related to the energy and efficiency. It's called the Energy and Efficiency and Conservation Plan, the Empower Reform, basically about energy efficiency in buildings. And there was a lot of effort put in by grassroots organizations to make sure that there's going to be assistance as well in some of the multifamily buildings that I think will be helpful to a lot of renters. And then there was a bill that passed that didn't expand per se the Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program. It increases the authorization. It doesn't require additional money, but increases the authorization for what the governor can put in the fund, and then also directs some of the money to go to underserved and overburdened communities. So I think as that gets worked out, it'll be interesting to see if any places in Tacoma Park may qualify for that. Encouraging community development for an improved and equitable quality of life is another one of your goals. And there are a lot of housing issues that are encompassed under there. So we'll revisit briefly the fact that while it didn't pass, we got much more progress on what we have called for many years the just cause eviction legislation, championed by Delegate Janelle Wilkins. It did pass the House this year. And it's never done that in the last 7-8 years that it's been around. So while we weren't able to get it through on the Senate side, it was absolute progress, and we now have that further point that we're able to start with when that bill comes back next session. There were, however, a number of pieces of legislation related to housing and renters that did pass. The governor had a housing package of 2 bills related to really affordable housing development that passed, and then another dealing with creating an office for renters' rights and helping provide some protections for renters as well. So, so there really was a lot that happened in that space this past session. And then the other goal that you list, or at least one of the other ones where it's connected to legislation and the budget, has an engaged, responsive, service-oriented government. And to that point, you all worked with the entire District 20 team on a legislative bond initiative that was totally successful. You asked for $200,000 to go toward the community center renovation project, and you got the $200,000. So that was certainly very good news. One of the other things I want to touch on at your request is looking at what the Maryland Municipal League's priorities were and how they fared in this, because this then becomes the segue, of course, into the coming priorities. They had 3 or 4 areas that were priorities, not all of which were necessarily significantly germane to Tacoma Park. There was one related to traffic safety around street racing and exhibition driving, prohibiting certain activities and in creating enforcement mechanism and penalties. One of the things that MML supported that I think we figured maybe doesn't have an impact in Tacoma Park is the creation of tourism zones. And then also then related to traffic was speed monitoring systems. And this one also would not have, it would have been a good bill. It did not pass, but wouldn't have affected Tacoma Park because it really applied to municipalities that don't have their own police force. The other thing that we spent a lot of time working with MML on toward the end of the legislative session, toward the end of the budget process, was an unexpected change in a proposal to change the future formula for highway user revenues to decrease the amount that would come back to locals. So I'm so sorry. I set a timer for myself and I didn't realize it was going to go off. So just give me a second here and I will figure out how to turn it off. My sincere apologies, folks. I am embarrassed by this. Okay, I don't know how to turn it off.
I love that it's Star Wars.
There it goes. It's turned off. I am so now I have some other thing going. Oh no, I was trying to be all responsible. Where was I? Highway user revenues. So we were able to, with your support, stave off that change for now. That is most definitely going to come back as an issue next session. As the state tackles within both the Transportation Trust Fund some really serious budget shortfalls, as well as our overall budget and a structural deficit. So I really was on time. So I'm happy to take questions, and if you want to then move on to what's next.
Councilmember Small?
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Ann. Always a pleasure. A couple of things. We talked a little bit offline. I got your email about the other legislation, so I will dig into that of due course. I think I'm curious about a couple of things. One being, what was the thing that you thought was going to move that faced stauncher political opposition than you thought? And if you look through particularly in the affordable housing and in the renting areas, if you look through the bills that passed, it seems like there's a lot of dancing around a couple of more substantive bills that people have advocated for. And that's a tendency I've noticed in Maryland with regards to the politics, is that if we change the just cause eviction to good cause eviction to make it more melodious to people, at the end of the day, that's just really a straight contract and quite reasonable and wouldn't necessarily require all of these additional supports. And I'm curious about whether or not there's any real appetite to deal with some of these fundamental structures that people have been advocating for a long time. And if that's just caught up in the politics of it being a long-term no, or if there's possibilities to move some of these more substantive things forward. It would not shock me at all if getting out of the House with the good cause bill meant that you got one step farther in committee in the Senate, kind of thing. So I'm curious about what the appetite is to be, change agents. It's kind of a mandate that the governor said he was coming in on. So I'm curious about it.
So on the housing things, I think my takeaway is there were several relatively small and two pretty significant renters bills that passed this session. That's a lot. The landlord lobby is very strong in Annapolis, and there are a lot of legislators who are landlords, and there are a lot of concerns about making sure that that things don't get tilted too far, right? In our attempts, I think, to try to balance rights and the playing field of rent court and all of that, You know, there's a legitimate concern that things don't go too far one way or the other. So, so honestly, I think because there was so much focus on the governor's bills, and there was a lot of pressure put on the landlord lobby in Annapolis to, you know, compromise. I think we were able to get a lot of compromise on a separate bill that was related to reforming the rent escrow process. And then, you know, it just got late in session. And the thought of doing one more thing, you know, that was, I think there's legitimate argument to be made that it's not, but I think from a certain perspective, oh my gosh, we've done so much now for renters, that's enough. And it's something that really does happen in Annapolis politics, where everybody's forced to compromise on things, which is why things are sometimes feel so incremental. But you know, there are often times like, well, we've already kind of done this for this group, so we don't want to, like, you know, do too much over here, because everything is seen as a zero-sum game. So if you're doing something good for someone over here, you must be hurting somebody over there. So it's you know, I think that's where some of the housing stuff landed, that the governor had these two big affordable housing bills, and then he had his big renters rate bill, and then there's this other rent escrow bill, and I think they were just like, we're done. And I will also say this was an incredibly busy session. There were, I'm not sure if it was a record number of bills introduced, as I was talking to Councilmember Gibson earlier, but the governor is signing over 1,000 bills. There was a lot that happened this session in so many areas. So I think there was also fatigue by the time the end of session came. And I will also say that the tone in Annapolis changed very dramatically when the Key Bridge collapsed. I think there was a growing contention, especially around the budget and tax issues and all. And I think I'm not the only one who felt a shift toward the end of session after that bridge collapse, and a desire to try to focus on some other things, some positive things, and for some of those other contentious issues, try to deal with them more quickly and quietly than perhaps they would have. So that's a long answer, but that's how that was my take on the end of session.
So if it was a last thing, do you regard it as having had a theme given the volume of bills? Is it just that there were a bunch of new people and they were trying to stick it to a new governor or things like that, or was there some sort of substantive welling up of Maryland desires that you could glean from the content?
Specific to the actual 1,000 that passed, I don't know that I would say there was a theme. There were a lot of things in housing that passed. There were a lot, as there always is with healthcare, that passed. You know, there are these buckets of things that pass every year or most years. So I don't know that it may be just that there are so many new legislators and they really want to make their mark in a way of having legislation, you know, that's successful, which is something that I think all legislators do. They want to have something to show their constituents that they're working for them. But I don't know that there's any one cause for there being so many bills, at least not that I could identify.
Thank you. Councilmember Gibson?
Also on housing, and I have to admit, I'll need to do my homework, but could you talk about HB 538, land use, affordable housing? Just 1 minute on what that bill does.
So that is one of the bills from the governor, meant to try to make it easier at the local level to be able to get the needed permits and whatever zoning changes are needed to create more affordable housing. So I think it impacts density and location and the permitting process.
With the state, then?
Yes.
Yes, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, thank you. I might have something on that that I can share with you that goes in more detail. I had two questions about bills this session. And one comment. In the past, the city has posted the testimony that we submitted on the on a section of the website, and I couldn't find 2024. And so it would be good. It would be good to have the written testimony at some point that we submitted this year posted in there. That's all. Two questions. One is about a part of one of the governor's housing bills, Housing Bill 2, I think it is. It's HB 2. There's a section allowing counties and the city of Baltimore to impose higher taxes on vacant properties, vacant as defined by abandoned, like housing vacant, not state property tax SDAT definition. It's not clear to me whether municipalities are included, and if not, I would like to flag it for a possible MML for next year.
I do not believe that municipalities were in that bill, but I would need to double check that.
I read it. It didn't say that it
Right,
was allowed, and that usually means it's not.
It's not. That's my
Okay, so that's
recollection,
your-
and
all
yes,
right.
my assessment of
So-
it, if it's not explicitly.
So,
Provided,
preview of what
yes.
I'm gonna say in about 5 minutes. Second question had to do with, also with MML. The Purple Line bill, the utility relocation bill.
Mm-hmm.
I understood that MML opposed it because it applied to municipal utilities, and that was a factor in it not going through. And so if it is reintroduced by Delegate Charkoudian, that would be something that we might want to work on, because it would be easy enough to support it with an amendment exempting smaller municipal utilities. And I don't know what, you don't have any idea why
No.
we didn't get there in the first place?
No,
Okay.
no, but I think that's a great idea to look into that.
Okay, so, thanks.
Councilmember Hanzak?
Just a couple quick questions. Under HB 428, SB 370, community schools, it is my understanding, and I don't know if I just don't know how many of the schools in Tacoma Park are community schools. I may be looking to the mayor or the city manager or anyone else who knows. Do we know how many of our schools are community schools? I know that, as far as I know, Rolling Terrace Elementary is, and I think Silver Spring International Middle School is. Does anyone else know the answer to that question?
I'm not sure.
No? What's that?
Say the bill number.
It's HB 428, SB 370. I mean, this catches my eye because to be really frank with you, I hadn't been that familiar with the community schools model. But given that we have an extremely high concentration of affordable housing, and we have a lot of folks that are served by our community schools, what I found is there are these community liaisons in our schools and these special schools within a school. There's even a clinic inside of our Rolling Terrace school that's really quite impressive. And this just caught my attention. I'm wondering whether there's anything that a municipality is required to do, possibly, to ensure that folks in our city have access to these, this $5 million in rental assistance, because this is a great asset to our community, given that we have a lot of folks who might have this need, and we have a rental assistance fund ourselves, so it really complements our budget, in addition to helping people.
So it'll be a new program, and the Department of Housing and Community Development at the state level will be managing the money and getting the money out to the community schools.
But I said through the schools,
Yes.
so we wouldn't need to play a role in doing anything, to your knowledge?
I don't
Okay.
believe so.
Okay, thanks. And then my other quick question is, did I hear you correctly on the economic development tourism zones? Did you say that probably would not apply to Tacoma?
That was our assessment
Yeah.
when we saw the bill initially, yes. So,
Okay.
yeah, didn't seem like it would apply.
Wouldn't be tourism zone for democracy building, would it? Just throwing that out there.
their original idea, no.
No, but just throwing that nugget out for everybody.
Love it.
Okay, great. So one of the things that I did want to make sure that we had some time to talk about, because this year we're being asked to put forward our legislative, legislative action request to MML earlier this year than in prior years. And in light of what Ann has already shared with us, the fact that there was quite a bit of momentum during this session on some of the areas that are really important to the city. So just as a reminder for my colleagues, we submitted 3 legislative action requests to MML last year. The first, we encouraged MML to initiate or support legislation to increase the authority for municipalities to collect revenues. Options might include the authority to collect a sales tax or receive a percentage of sales tax collected in the jurisdiction, or receive a portion of revenue generated by alcohol or tobacco sales. And I know, Ann, you and I had kind of talked about that, and how open legislators might be this coming session around allowing municipalities to have the ability to collect sales tax, and how folks may be thinking about the possibility of us kind of tacking off of pinching off of some of the alcohol and tobacco sales revenues, and whether or not that could be directed to local municipalities.
Yeah, I think revenues is going to be a very big topic in 2025 in Annapolis and leading up to session. And I think there will be a battle related to trying to find progressive revenue enhancement solutions, as opposed to, something that honestly is simple, which is increasing the sales tax, but of course that's regressive. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where there's going to be a lot of battling for the coming session, as the state tries to balance its structural deficits coming up. But it's, I do believe, the right time to be in on those discussions, and try to figure out whatever is getting reformed or increased, whatever the proposal is, to see if there could actually be some share for municipalities.
And then, I think we got out of that highway user revenue kind of fear, but is it possible we may find ourselves in a situation where, again, folks may want to play around with some of the monies that are already going to municipalities, like highway user revenues? And so does it make sense for us, as part of our LAR, to be very explicit that we don't want those highway user revenues to be decreased?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And folks like me who've been around for a long time in Annapolis, this is a perennial fight. And in other times where there've been budget deficits, absolutely that is seen as a source, to shave off a little money here, to make it better for the state. So absolutely, I think that will be a risk, that funding will be at risk, or those formulas will be at risk. And absolutely, I think, all the municipalities ought to be putting in, an LAR and make that perhaps MML's #1 priority for the coming year.
And then, last year we submitted an item related to housing, and you've just talked about a lot of housing bills, like the governor's bills that went through. We encourage MML to initiate or support legislation that assists municipalities with housing and community development issues, such as promoting legislation or sources of funding to expedite affordable housing creation, giving authority to municipal and county governments, again related to Just Cause, Now Good Cause, and creating an infrastructure repair and rehab fund for multifamily buildings, such as condominiums, to support building improvements, including energy efficiency
It's getting
upgrades.
overly specific for this coming year.
Yeah, I feel like that's where we were.
Well, that's before the revenue, oh, sorry,
That-
not my turn.
Yeah, that was before. Yeah, that's why I bring it up. That's what we had before. Looks like a lot of the things that we brought up before, we got traction on during this session. So one point for discussion for this council, and I left one item off. The other item was examining income eligibility criteria for state property tax credit programs for low-income homeowners to ensure the criteria accounts for the rising cost of living in the area. And so there were lots of things that happened this session that touched upon those items. So the question for the council is, is housing still a big area that we want to focus an LAR on? Or given what has transpired over this session and what we had put down before, are there other topics that maybe, or other issues that we may want to choose to highlight instead, or use our LAR to support? So that's one of the big questions for us right now, and unfortunately can't answer it for us. But you know that there were bills that were passed around. I know Lord Charcutian worked on, tax credit programs. The infrastructure rehab for multifamily buildings. I know that was the energy efficiency components of it. That was something that came through this session.
And that came through.
Yep, and that came through with all of the governor's housing bills that kind of touched on, funding for expediting the availability of affordable housing and housing creation. And then Good Cause got one step closer than it ever has been. So the question is, we only have 3. I think we still only have 3, right? We finagled it and kind of turned that 3 into 20, but given that we only have 3 this year, I'm wondering from folks, is the housing and community development space, is the housing space, which is different from the community development space, is the housing space something that we want to continue to use an LAR for? Councilmember Gibson.
I guess what would be the alternative? I mean, my first instinct is that housing is all the more important since I've been on council, but I don't know what preceded it, so I see no reason why it would be. I mean, certain things I guess were passed, but not too much that affects us. I mean, the permitting isn't the issue. So affordable housing generally seems like as important as ever, and I'm not sure what your alternative would be.
Sure. I think one thing that's important to keep in mind that we're talking about here, we're talking about state legislation or things that we want to happen at the state level in terms of laws that they have the authority over that could ultimately help to impact the availability of housing or some impact, renters' rights, those kinds of things on a local level. So it's not the same as saying, we could say, hey, give us more money to just build affordable housing, but they've done that in a bunch of different ways. I think one alternative to your point, Councilmember Gibson, is there another topic, right? Are there things like stormwater that we maybe want to call out more because we didn't call out as many environmental related things as we've done in the past? Are there things related to recreation or education that we want to build on or create opportunities for things that might lead to the investment in beyond the blueprint or what we may not see in the governor's blueprint? Are there things that we want to see in the community that we want to highlight? So those are some of the things that we're kind of thinking through that we may want to say, hey, for this particular upcoming session, housing, we may put it to the side in exchange for maybe some sustainability bills. But again, there was a lot that passed in terms of the environment last session, but that's kind of where we're trying to focus some of this discussion. Councilmember Dabala, you're before, and then Councilmember Gibson.
Couple things. One is I did get to talk to Delegate Charcutian. And she mentioned the Purple Line bill for SHA relocating utilities as something she would probably put in again, and that it really is a statewide issue. It is not just, we think of it as a Purple Line issue, but it's actually a statewide issue in terms of SHA accommodating things that need to be happening across the state. So she suggested we consider putting that on the list of MML-related topics. She mentioned that she thought, I forgot about this, that 100% clean energy by 2035 and how you get there. So there's the commitment to do it, but it's not codified in the state bills as to how you get there in the way that energy efficiency is codified now. And that she thought that would be a topic for next year. I don't know why I completely spaced on that this afternoon. But, so that might be something to call to MML's attention, because they also keep looking for sustainability types of things to be working on. And on the property tax bill that didn't pass this year, she said she might consider putting it in again, but because of the cost and the reaction that she got to the cost of that bill, it would be symbolic. She wouldn't necessarily expect it to pass. So that we might not want to put that one on the list of calling MML's attention to something that they didn't like the first time. And I think I already mentioned exploring the authority for vacant housing tax is part of the revenue one that we might have. So I would think a possible third could be the clean energy. Although I still think there's plenty in housing to pursue. I just don't know concretely what no pun intended, what it is, given how much has already passed this year.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yeah, to follow up, then I guess for those of us that haven't been deep into this, it's a question of the role that the state can play on these issues versus I'm a lot more familiar after this year and a half around county issues and what they can do, but I'm not as familiar to know where there's traction at the state level to affect us, whether it's housing, whether it's climate issues, stormwater. I just don't have enough information to make any kind of recommendation one way or the other.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's important to keep in mind is what we're talking about right now. We have the ability to lobby the state or to tack on or comment on any bill that happens during the next session. What we're talking about right now are what are the priority items that we want to move forward to the Maryland Municipal League for their consideration for a legislative action that they may then take up and push in addition to what we would push. So ideally, you know, having those bigger ticket items that have more broader applicability to municipalities that would be of interest to MML, it's really great. Like, I still want to make sure, because I don't feel like we're there yet, aspects of Vision Zero, and definitely including pedestrian safety, transportation, maybe getting SHA to pay for their own ADA and sidewalks along state roads. Those kinds of things that I think are still not quite there, that we can tweak, but really making pedestrian safety a focus is one area that I think makes sense for us to keep pushing, in addition to give me whatever tax money we can have to kind of help to address some of our cost issues. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I do think that there's probably an opportunity to talk around some of the policy decisions and manifestations that come from SHA and other sorts of agencies to sort of bind them and behaviorally. And that is a tack that we have not taken yet that I think we've been asked to swear off of to some degree. But I do think that that's probably the next step with regard to, reporting or calculating where public benefits are going to be spent, something like that. But I would also add that if we could start maybe thinking about, as we're thinking about land use issues, one of the things that comes up perennially is, and it's a concern that I have about affordable building, is in the public benefit space, because oftentimes you end up with like a really small corner park in a new affordable multi-family building with essentially no place to go or to play. And as these for-profit sources continue to enter into the marketplace, it's not hard to see where the rubber hits the road with regard to incentivizing people to pay exorbitant amounts of money to recreate. I don't think that that is democratic in any way. And in addition to trying to find money for our rec center, if we could maybe start to think about incentivizing land use issues for flat land, or eminent domain issues for fair prices for use of potentially flat land so that people could play things. Given the number of new sports that people are trying to get to use to get into college, it would seem like we would want people to have opportunities to recreate. And I think that that's a lane that we could probably take advantage of, particularly in the Down County area and in the areas close to these metropolitan concentrations.
Thanks, Councilmember Small. And I think, recreation was something that we had also thought about on the short list. And it's a tricky space, right? Because a lot of times there's some state aspects as it relates to, and Anna and I just talked about this a little bit, green space, right? Parks, that kind of thing. But when we're actually talking about buildings for the purpose of recreation, that's when all of a sudden there's no money. And so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's something that we could maybe look at. And I'm not sure how many parks related or open space related bills came out during this last session. I don't recall seeing many. I don't recall seeing any.
I don't believe there were any pieces of legislation
Or
I'm
related to
aware of.
recreations
I think a
or
lot
anything
of
like
that
that.
is more in the budget.
Yeah.
And capital projects and things like that.
Yeah.
I hate to jump in there, but
Yeah.
to edify that comment, I guess, baseball gods have not been happy this spring, and very few baseball games have been being played. One of the reasons that happens here is because we have a really, really effective county water table saturation system, and if the number comes up, then nobody plays. That doesn't keep people from going out there and doing things to the fields, though. So then it potentially adds damage to fields with people who are not organized. And I'd argue that to some degree, other places have attempted to remedy that issue by just having more turf fields and having them with drainage and access and things like that. It's obvious that rich people do that at all these private schools. And if there were potentially common areas where these turf fields could be accommodated, like at the Hillendale area, that could potentially be a boon to local people, sports tourism, or anything like that. So it's a lane.
Okay. Councilmember Fulcher?
I know that we haven't gotten the traction on it, but I would be interested in, revisiting stop sign cameras. Just, revenue and safety.
Councilmember Honzak?
This may be too big of a question to answer right now, but I guess I would be very interested if you walk through, as you did, our big bucket priorities, and you kind of said, look, we got almost here in this bucket, we got almost here. There was so much momentum in this space that I anticipate, X to happen. I would really value you saying, what are we most likely to, if we add our voice, kind of possibly be able to achieve based on what we've already been trying to achieve, and which things are worth setting aside, because we probably got about as far as we're going to get in the coming year, knowing politically that we're going to be kind of looking at similar people in power, and we know what the budget realities are. I know that's a big question, but I would value it hearing it. I mean, you walked us through what we did achieve, but I didn't quite hear that come out except in a couple of domains. Is that too? If that's too big to answer right now, you don't have to do that.
I think, I mean, we're not done on any of them, right?
Of course.
So, I think it depends on, what are some of the next steps. So a lot of times I mentioned, that for just about everything, there's compromise, right? So you want to get all this stuff, and then the opposition or the money or whatever, is over here, and you end up here. I think that it really has to be at each item. Is there an opportunity to revisit? If money's the big problem, that might have to wait. I think that's actually what Councilmember DeBala talked to Delegate Charkoudian about. Like, this property tax, changing the eligibility is worthwhile. It's really important. There's no money. And so that one, so I think that always becomes the question then, is not just, should we revisit it, but some of it's timing. Is it this year? Well, maybe it's not this year. Maybe it's a couple years down the road that we can. On other things, things get done around the edges. There's probably room to continue. Was there anything we did this in the compromise work, the negotiating this session, that gives us a clearer path for how to be successful? Maybe not on the whole rest of it, but another big chunk of it. So I think it just depends on each issue, and how much happened on each. And so I can kind of go through and do a little bit of that analysis if you like. I don't think I can go through the list right now.
No, not the full list. I just thought a few buckets might come out kind of. I mean, I heard you, for example, you talked about the property tax credit. That one kind of came through fairly clearly. Like, this might not be the time, because that's something I felt really passionately about. But maybe you could just answer the question. It seems like next year might be the time to look at, not because of just knowing these big buckets, this one, are be likely, with a little bit of extra effort, you might be able to push it over the finish line. Is that just in the big buckets, just from each of the buckets, maybe one thing that you think it could be the time to? And we understand you're speculating, but that's why we have you here, is to analyze based on your deep knowledge of what you just experienced and what you see coming, right?
Sure. So in thinking about communities of belonging,
Yep.
We talked about healthcare expansion. What's the next step for that? I think in talking about all kinds of supports for the entire community, including the immigrant community. I think there's always going to be something to do there. So I absolutely believe that with mental health, we're not letting up on any of that. There's still a lot of issues with mental health, substance use disorder that still need to be addressed. I don't think that is going to, we can't be done with all of that. Obviously with the sustainable governments, we have to continue to talk about revenue authority, revenue enhancements for municipalities. Environment, there's always going to be stuff we can work on there. And I do think that there are things that a municipality I think, when it comes to the environment, has a special voice on. And I think that is always going to be worth working on. The buckets are big, encouraging community development for an improved and equitable quality of life. Yes, we did a lot in housing, but there's still a lot more to be done. Some of it, I think I can't remember who I was talking to in the break about, there's a lot right now that's going to happen related to implementation of things, right? So I think we were talking about with environment. We've done so much in the policy realm. It's not all done, but there has to be time spent implementing the things that we've passed. And I think that's also true for housing. But I will also say, I know advocates are absolutely going to be bringing back good cause. And then responsive, service-oriented government. I mean, that's certainly something that, I think as we have thoughts about what's needed at the state level to help municipalities do that, we just need to identify some concrete policy changes that are needed to do that. So I don't know if that actually answers your question, but I think you have very important priorities, and they are very broad. And so I think we'd have many years to say to any of them that we're done.
Yeah, I think that's sort of helpful. I mean, I think one of the phrases you used when you said adding the municipal voice to this particular dialogue could make this kind of difference. And I think the question that we as a city should be asking ourselves is, when we add Tacoma Park's municipal voice to that, because we're investing real dollars and cents into this too, and other cities are going to be advocating whether or not we invest, but we are investing. It's a sizable chunk of change. So, what specifically are we going to get out of it that's really worth that added value that we're investing in? Because we could invest that money right here rather than lobbying. And I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying I think it's a really important question to ask what we're getting for that. How we do it.
Councilmember Small, there are others.
I'm sorry. I was going to quibble.
Yeah,
So-
no, there's others in the queue. Councilmember Fulcher?
I just had a question about, are we ever concerned about things passing that we don't want to pass? And were there any things like those that got close that we might want to make sure that we're, chipping away at the edges? Or, for instance, MML wasn't happy with a bill that was going to mess with municipalities and was it power companies? I don't remember what you were saying. And so there's the thing that they might like seeing added to that in order to be more comfortable with that bill passing. Mm-hmm. Are there any bills out there that we're concerned about passing that maybe we'd want to make sure that, the piece got added that would make us more comfortable with it? Is just one of my other thoughts when we don't have anything really big jumping out at us that we know for sure that we want, protecting ourselves from the things that we do not want.
No, Councilmember Fulcher, I think that's a really good point. So I think we have some marching orders in terms of next steps. I've been taking some notes, so I kind of have a feel for where we will likely need to flesh things out a little bit more. So it sounds like urging MML, of course, to continue to seek out ways to increase authority for municipalities to collect revenue will be something. Of course, we're going to try to weave in the highway user revenue as a way to kind of get into that, and maybe that's where we focus a little less so than explicitly calling out certain aspects of certain types of sales tax. I don't know, debating. It sounds like we'll do a little bit more digging into perhaps one related to climate, maybe clean energy, stormwater, kind of figure out how we want to do that. Councilmember Small, when you mentioned stormwater issues on parks and open fields and things like that, I was trying to make that state connection, and I'm kind of wondering whether or not that might be an angle to kind of get at some of those issues.
Yeah, if they want to pay for draining, that'd be wonderful. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that. The only thing that I wanted to add to that was that I do think it's important to recognize that, you know, in the process of being an effective city or municipal actor at the state level, it is also my experience that it is next to impossible to get anything done if you don't have a lobbyist. And also that, you know, kind of the way that calculations are made. The difficult thing about politics in any case is always that the burn is the burn, because you don't necessarily know scientifically that someone is not going to put a bug in their bonnet and give you a hard time about something that you didn't expect to have. So I did want to say that, you know, in the process of evaluating where we're spending money and where we're getting value, from my own personal experience, working with you, and whatever professional acumen I feel like I already have, I feel like you're the bee's knees. So there you go.
Awesome. I agree. All right, getting back to summarizing where we're going. Okay, so we talked about climate, stormwater, so figuring out maybe an LAR related to that.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not seeing a follow-up to this here at all. Okay,
Yeah.
never mind, I'm sorry.
It sounds like we're still around these Vision Zero goals. Definitely thinking of ways to kind of get SHA to be more of an actor in terms of maybe aspects of sidewalk and ADA compliance and making sure that they're responsible for paying for those, and that's clear. Stop sign cameras, and then also just general working together. Another space that we can kind of do a little digging into in case something doesn't quite work are aspects of, maybe there are aspects of health, mental health, substance use that might make sense for us to weigh in on. And then we're still torn around with this recreation activities for youth, which could have that overlay of mental health and substance use, depending on how we want to treat that.
And sustainability, because nobody can play, like the flag football people can't play, softball people can't play.
Hit your mic.
I was muttering to you guys, but I do think there are sustainability issues there too, because you're basically eliminating anybody who's got a post school recreational activity nearly every day before 9 o'clock sometimes, based on the water table.
And also just kind of thinking, Ann, can you remind me where we ended with, I know that there was some discussion, Senator Smith, can give him a ring, about the youth, some of the youth criminal justice bills that passed, not this session, but the prior one. Some modifications that folks were contemplating making. I know that there was a lot of discussions that were going on about that. And whether or not that is also something that's still kind of hanging out there, because my brain is now moving into this youth recreation kind of space, and how and whether or not there's a criminal justice angle.
So I would absolutely be tying recreational activities and dollars to help with the physical space to mental health, to youth justice issues, criminal justice issues, to physical health issues. I think that I am seeing an opportunity because of that youth justice bill that was passed this year, this session, really kind of rolling back some of the reforms that had been previously implemented. I think there really needs to be a shift in talking about what are the services kids need, what are the services families need, what are the opportunities that young people need. So I think that absolutely is a totally legitimate tie-in. There was a lot of talk as there were debates on the youth justice bill about services. And in the end, part of it certainly is because of the budget situation. There was very relatively little invested in beefing up services for kids. So I think that's something that's going to get a very serious look at.
Okay, awesome. Okay, well, we don't want you to have a sleeping bag to finish up tonight's conversation, but this has been really, really helpful as we are working through the LARs and kind of thinking through how we want to push things forward. So just for folks to know, we'll put pen to paper on a few items to send out for council members to review and consider. And then we will reconvene and talk about this item, I believe, next week. All right, thank you so much, Anne. We really appreciate you coming out.
Delisha, just to, if in that, I guess, building off my question about what can the state do? I mean, that's where I do a little struggle versus what the county do, what we can do. So if the context of these issues can clarify what can the state do? I mean, that's kind of a big question, but where, I guess, where is there maybe some traction to build off of, which I guess Ann spoke a little bit about that, but to frame it where there's leverage, I guess.
I think what you're probably asking for is for a maybe a little bit more background for
Context, yeah, background context.
So normally the LARs that we send forward, we don't include a lot of context in terms of prior bills, but what we can do is maybe try to at least reference some, if that will help to kind of understand. I think one of the things too that I will just say, it is always helpful, and we're always looking for more folks on council, folks around next cycle, to be on the bill review group, because that actually helps you to understand what the bills are. When you get that document, I mean, it's sent to everybody. You get that document that goes through all of those bills. I would encourage everyone, relook at that list of that bill list, that chart, and then you can see all of those different bills, the language that's in them, and that helps you to get a better understanding of what the state and what the state legislators do and types of bills and what that language entails, and how it may relate or be beneficial to the city to weigh in on. So again, we can, as we're kind of shaping this thing out, I'm happy to try to at least provide a couple of links, but would encourage folks to definitely take a look at those bill charts that were listed, do some word searching on the things that we've talked about today to kind of help also with giving a little context. No worries. All right. Thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate it. All right. No worries. Go ahead and stand up. Last item. I'm hoping this won't be long, but it may be. Okay, so one of the things the last item we have is a discussion of the FY 2026 budget policy resolution. I want to make sure that, because Are you in pain? Do you need to walk? Okay. Okay. So one of the things that I do want to make sure that everybody has is the right version. So just as a reminder, what we're talking about tonight is a resolution designed to establish some of the main objectives that we have as a council leading up to the FY26 budget. So we're kind of spelling out what are some of the things that we want to make sure that staff either bring to us or consider as part of the FY26 budget development process. So there is a markup version that folks have received. You should have received a handout. Just to clarify, a number of the markups that's included in this version were
It's the one by
yep,
itself.
it's the one that says 5/15/2024. Yep. And so just as a little bit of context, Councilmember Dabala, and I've weighed in on this. We also had staff take a look at the resolution through the lens of clarifying points, but also highlighting some of the steps that our staff were already anticipating that they were going to take as part of the development of the FY 2026 budget. So as you'll see, there's a few whereas clauses that have been adjusted based on some of the feedback that has been received. So for example, edit of note is the, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th whereas clause, where it would really be helpful for the members of the working group to just really take note to make sure that we're accurately capturing what you did. But this language now says, whereas the short-term working group submitted a report to the City Council on March 6, 2024, recommending next steps in the city's evaluation of department fees and the implementation of the standardized budget calendar. And if there are other activities that subcommittee also did that would make sense for us to include in this whereas, let us know and we can provide an edit to that.
Did you want
Okay.
that right now?
Um,
Or did, I'm not sure what's our time.
No, you could just put it in a, you could put it in an edit.
Can I
Yeah, sure.
comment? Yeah, I guess the working group, the three of us, we did end up with this one set of next steps. We also did other research. So that's the kind of thing, like I did research on performance metrics, I did some research on a survey, and that would be something that I could add in. Is that what you're saying? Or would?
Just want to quadruple check because I know that committee. So is the other point to clarify that there was also additional research? We can add that in. Okay. Perfect. And we can make that a friendly amendment. Okay. And let's see, budget reports. Okay, and then there was another edit to a resolve clause, and it is the second resolve clause where there was some clarification that was added. Be it further resolved that the City Council, working closely with the city manager and staff, will review the policy recommendations of the council working group formed under Resolution 2023-15. So for those members that were on that subcommittee, there is a whereas clause that the council and the city manager and staff will review the recommendations that were made by that group. Okay. One piece, Councilmember DeMello, go ahead.
And again, just to emphasize that the edits that are shown here are city staff edits that came in after it got posted. So they're what I would consider friendly amendments. And then a couple of things that were in and that got crossed out again, it's because they were council member edits. And so we were trying to keep it clean that way, just saying.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMello.
Can I go back? This,
Go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, Terry.
Second. Councilmember Gibson's first, and Councilmember Siemens, your second.
I just want to say that the same point that I made up above where the additional research, I'd like to have that also in this, be it further resolved, we'll review policy recommendations and additional research. It's just that was some of the work and it didn't end up being a policy recommendation, but
Okay, and I just want to confirm from other members of the group, so was the additional research reflected in the report recommendations that were made, or is there additional data that members
it
of staff
didn't get included in the policy recommendation.
Okay, so is that information that the subcommittee will be providing to the rest of council and the city staff?
I have already provided some of it, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there, like I mentioned, the two pieces where the performance metrics are measured and the GFO recommendations and that sort. The other thing was discussion and research back on a survey. So,
Okay.
so anyhow, that was a part of our work, product, but it wasn't in the policy recommendation, I don't think. Was it, Andrew?
Okay.
So if I recall correctly, it was referenced as an addendum to the policy recommendation, just as sort of an FYI to council. And I believe that was shared, you did share that with council via email
I did.
at a later date.
On that one item, yes.
On that item, yeah.
Okay, so it's not like an additional thing, it's part of the report, okay.
It's not a part of the report, but it was a part of, how do you say?
No, we can figure it out. Okay. So,
So,
next.
Mr. Siemens,
Oh, Mr. Siemens, I'm so sorry. Councilmember Siemens, go ahead.
two quick questions. One is on that first, be it further resolved.
Yeah.
On my copy, it is in a fainter color than the rest of the paper. Does that have an implication of why that is?
It was track changes, and the computer made it green instead of red, and therefore it looks lighter.
Okay. It's much grayer on mine, thank you. The other thing is, it says that the city council, working closely with the city manager and staff, will review the policy recommendations, and that's as far as it goes. Shouldn't it be more explicit that it's toward standardizing a budget calendar?
Well, I think, Councilmember Siemens, some of the policy recommendations that were under consideration or that was put forward to the council from the subgroup related to things beyond the calendar itself.
But it seems like there should be some input from this review. Should there?
That's what we're considering doing this, yeah. Okay. Okay, I think we can tweak that, because I think the further resolve clauses kind of take some of those items or kind of serve within those additional whereas clauses. So the first one is about the calendar.
I've only skimmed this document, so.
Okay, no worries, I'm sorry. And then the others are about the equipment replacement reserve. And then some of the other aspects of like city fees are incorporated in some of the other whereas clauses. I mean, the resolve
Okay.
clauses, I apologize.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next, be it further resolve, I do just want to point out this major change from the version that was sent out, or that was posted on Friday. Be it further resolved that the city council will work with the city manager and designated staff to refine the newly developed FY 2025 budget calendar to be applied to the FY 2026 budget process, which will include a new council member municipal budget orientation, pre-budget adoption public engagement, I should say, and FY 2026 budget forecast, and a city council resolution establishing budget priorities, goals, and budgetary considerations to the city manager prior to budget creation. Okay, so I know that there was a question around public engagement. I think the pre-budget adoption public engagement component includes a number of things, because I believe we already have our platform that we can use to engage residents that can include additional things like surveys or community meetings to kind of facilitate understanding and communication around the budget.
Okay.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yeah, I had previously, I guess on Monday, sent a proposed resolution that included the word or the consideration, what was it, having to do with, we'll work with the city manager designates to support expanded opportunities for resident engagement, which I think does this in the budget process, including use of a budget priority survey. And I have had discussions with city manager about that. I would just as soon have that also included in here, use of a budget priority survey, as that's what I intended, and that's what I proposed back on Monday. Perhaps the city manager could comment on whether it's appropriate or not.
Well, It is a technique among many. It's among a palette of possibilities for public engagement that staff can recommend to the mayor and council, or we intend to. If mayor and council feel strongly, specifically, that this public survey is something you want to express publicly, then you could include it. But it would be one of a number of other things. And I just, saying including, I guess, would be fine. The larger point is that it will be one of a number of things that we will be recommending and hoping to do to increase public engagement with the next budget process. So I think the reason that it's listed this way, I'm assuming, is because why call out one technique out of, if there's ultimately going to be, say, 5 or 6? Why just single out one? On the other hand, if the mayor and council feel that strongly about that technique, and this is something you're thinking about now, then at your pleasure, you could call it out as an example. And I think that's what the including means. It's an example.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I will say,
and there was a part of the I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you have the
Yeah,
floor.
that, yes, including this, because this was a part of the research that I and the committee looked at. We looked at surveys and as one tool. So it's not going to make or break this, but I do think that it is a positive step, best practice, or a practice at least that's been used in other places, and would recommend that it be included here. But
Yeah.
I leave it to the council if they would
Sure.
like to have,
Sure. I mean, I think one of my main issues with explicitly calling out a survey is, what do we mean by survey? We learned when we did our community survey that online surveys typically are biased, in that many of our residents of color who speak other languages typically are not engaged. And so the way to properly do a survey to ensure that you access all would be to identify or create not just an online mechanism for the survey, but a paper survey. It needs to be translated. It needs to be, you may need to do focus groups. We had to do that with our last community survey, where we actually had focus groups with those residents that speak Amharic and Spanish to really try to get a better understanding and write the survey to their level. So it then means that to do it properly, it would require us to make sure that we devote the necessary resources. So that's why I don't want to that's why I have concerns about explicitly calling out one method when we know, in order to get as much feedback as we can across our entire cities, all of our cities' residents, we have to apply a multi-pronged approach to get that feedback. So that's my concern with just explicitly calling out a survey. It's one tool that could be used for those communities where people use the internet, they like SurveyMonkey, and you'll get 100 responses. It's not gonna work in some communities where you send something like that out and maybe you get 10 people responding and they all look the same. So that's where I think that what I would encourage staff to do is, while survey could be one option, but I really want to encourage staff to take a multi-pronged approach and be flexible in terms of how we're getting that engagement, specifically around a budget, which is kind of hard for people to conceptually weigh in on. It just means we have to take a different approach. Just want to check, Councilmember Fulcher?
Yeah, I would also be not necessarily wanting to wed us to one form of getting public input, and I'm not actually sure, though. I think that our working group document calls out a few different ways to get input, including the example of a survey. I'm not sure that it is doing that, wedding us to having a survey done, if I recall correctly.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember DeBala.
I was just going to say that I think rather than list examples of techniques, I would like to say something similar to what the city manager just said.
Yes.
Opportunities for public engagement before the budget adoption. And take that phrase and unpack it a little rather than add an example. And I can. Okay, that's all I want to say.
All right. Councilmember Gibson, did you have another comment?
Yeah, just, I get the drift here. I would, pre-budget adoption, you used, Mayor, the term multifaceted. We may want to talk about that being multifaceted public engagement. So as to, again, we want to broaden it. Surveys may be included. There's no one way of getting this information, and there's no perfect way of getting this information either.
Okay. Sorry, I'm taking notes. All right. Councilmember Hanzak.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand because I wasn't part of that subcommittee. So this is sort of a question for the subcommittee members as well as Councilmember Gibson, since you were expressing this. So when I think of what you might be driving at when you're thinking of a survey, I'm wondering if you're trying to be more explicit in part because you're interested in answering that question of if you could go out into the community and try to figure out what kinds of trade-offs we might make in terms of large buckets of services. I'm thinking of conversations that were taking place years ago and this issue might come up in your subcommittee, versus just how are we going to prioritize for next year's budget, but are there things that we might be willing to trade off as a community that are really big questions for our community? I'm not suggesting that we should cut anything or anything, but is that possibly what is in your mind when you're saying I want to be more explicit, and did that issue come up in terms of how we might get at that, or if we need to get at that in the subcommittee? And I'm looking, it was the three of you, right? You and Councilmember Siemens. Did that issue come up, and where did you go with that?
We did not go into deep
Okay.
discussion of the kinds of surveys. The context, however, at least that my understanding, and probably my colleagues speak for themselves, but the kind of prioritization, the need for prioritization is absolutely one of the reasons why I think a survey would be one tool to get at that, because I think we will need to make some priorities, have priorities in terms of what are core services versus not core services, what the level of service is, what people, where people would like to spend their money when given choices. So it's a hard one, but that's certainly behind my perspective on this. I can't speak for my colleagues.
Councilmember Fulcher.
The pre-budget adoption public engagement, is that the timing on that is something that we're looking at being in the calendar that is also in here? Okay.
Yeah,
because to me that's sort of more of what I'm hearing from residents, is that they feel like most of everything's been done by the time they're able to be a part of it. So just making sure that there's some public input earlier on.
Yeah. And I do just want to make sure, because I think that that was one of the goals, right? So the goals were, I mean, in an ideal scenario, even this budget cycle, we would have had a little bit more time, that once council had passed its resolution around the key projects that we wanted to move forward, that there could have been some community engagement around those and kind of weighing the value of them, that would have allowed us to at least have a little bit more insight from the public around what is it that we really want. Folks would be okay with us making sure that we include in the budget. If we were in a situation, we weren't in this budget, but if we were in a situation where something came up in February and now all of a sudden we have to cut $500,000 from the budget, right? not speaking that into existence, but just saying,
I didn't hear that.
but just saying, right? That's something that, you know, if we had that community engagement around some of the priority topics or priority projects that we had already pre-identified, that would have been really helpful for us to have that information before and as we were deliberating on the budget. Councilmember Gibson.
I just want to say wholeheartedly accept that people don't want it after the fact, that they make, the decisions have already been made. So
Yeah.
pre-budget, multifaceted, works for me.
Okay, thank you. And just to make sure we're out of here by at a reasonable hour, I do want to just.
Before we do that.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Councilmember Gibson. I'm sorry, Councilmember Siemens, did you have something? Okay. Councilmember DeBoe.
While we're on the subject of community input, we got some input earlier this evening about whether there could be public updates on progress on these items. And I don't know if I think that's a good idea or not, but I think we should consider it. And it would fit in that first resolve, because we're already saying, as we did last year, because last year was an issue, that we had to call for public reporting on the actual quarterly reports and the expenditures. So we did that, and it's in here again. And so if we wanted to say, and then we would have regular check-ins on where we are on the progress on these items in this resolution, we would put it in there. So I'm open to whether anybody else wants to add that in there.
I think I just want to.
We got them, I think, this past time round, because David and then Rob were very diligent about that, but we didn't require it.
It doesn't need to be in here in order to have that happen. That's just simply council expressing, and, you know, to my staff and me, you'd like to have it. But it's kind of granular, but, I mean, if you're just talking about reporting, it will happen.
Okay.
But it's your pleasure if you want to include it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, and I think that this, not to say that this is overkill, but I'm not sure what the updates would include beyond what we already have here. So if they're already having to report on aspects of where our current budget is, so if we're talking about budget formulation versus budget execution, in terms of execution, we're getting those updates. We're getting the financial reports. We know where our current budget is, right? We're going to get those updates. When we're talking about the formulation, like how are we progressing in developing the budget, that's here. We're going to have a calendar. It's going to tell us when are we going to discuss our priorities. So that's something that we're going to discuss the priorities. There'll be a resolution tied to it. There's going to be an update in terms of community engagement, and that's going to be a part of the calendar. And so then that way it'll be very transparent in terms of what people or how we're going to engage the community. There'll be the new council member municipal budget orientation. All of those things will be a matter of public record and will provide overviews and updates associated with the budget. So I'm not sure what an extra report in terms of the budget formulation will give us. Now, the execution is already there. Where are we in Q1 in terms of the budget, in Q2 and Q3? Like, we already do that. But I'm not seeing where we would need additional updates in terms of the budget process, because that's going to be spelled out as part of the calendar and the activities that we're doing along the way. So I could be missing something, but I'm thinking that that's going to be kind of spelled out as part of the calendar and the work that we're doing along the way.
That makes sense to me. I think perhaps if they're adding some steps in terms of the community public engagement, there may be some new reporting on that.
Right,
That-
like readouts of, hey, but that would be like another council meeting.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
that would, need to be something that we would want to make sure we work into the calendar.
Yeah.
Or, the mayor would need to make sure that that's on the agenda. So we had a series of community meetings about the budget, coming back to the council. This is what we heard. Here are the areas, right? Yep. Okay, and so I want to just kind of get to a couple of other whereas clauses that were Some were just a little lighter because they were moved around, so we're not going to talk about those. But this, the big whereas clause, where we kind of walk through that the city council will work with the city manager, designated staff in the next 8 months to consider the feasibility of increasing the city's revenue with potential adjustments to the following revenue sources. So the first is the city fees to ensure that revenues cover the estimated cost of service delivery where feasible. The second is stormwater fund fees. In addition, an additional civil engineer to assist the city in its expansion of flood management efforts. And so the next set are tax revenue sources: railroad and utility tax, vacant property or vacant housing tax, and commercial property tax. Now, one thing I will say with the commercial property tax, there was discussions that were already shared on that point. I know that the subgroup, yes, Councilmember
Yeah, I mean,
Fulcher.
also vacant property tax. I mean, we can do something like that if we're trying to curb behavior, it's fine. But the number of properties that are legally vacant and we would be able to apply a vacant property tax to are pretty negligible in Tacoma Park. And so it's not a source of revenue. Like, if we're doing it because we are trying to change behavior, great. But if we're expecting to get money out of it, no.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. So one question for folks in looking at this, because I know the subgroup looked at the commercial property tax as well, and I know that there were discussions around the fact that for a number of reasons, this may, having a separate or a different commercial property tax may not be the best approach. I see Councilmember Fulcher.
I mean, yeah, and that's my understanding is that there was a it's not commercial property tax, it's
Personal property.
the stuff that you have for your
The
business.
stuff that you have for your
and
business.
that you guys got rid of that, thinking that you would increase the commercial property tax later. It is a little bit complicated, right? Like OTBA, everything that can be rented is rented. However, those rental prices are pretty heavy per square foot compared to other areas in the region. So how might increasing that commercial property tax look to us? And then also when you look outside of OTBA in areas where we might be having a hard time and less stable occupancy, I can't speak anymore, whatever. What would that look like for those areas? So, just stuff to keep in mind.
Yeah. And one of the things that I do think is important to keep in mind when we're talking about commercial property tax as well is that if we are promoting small businesses, these big landlords are not necessarily going to just shoulder that cost. That added cost is going to be passed down to those small businesses. So this is something that we could still talk about.
Rather than talk about it.
Yeah, we could still talk about it, but I do just want to make sure that if there are folks that have concerns about even having the discussion, that we know that now. Councilmember Gibson.
I'll just say.
Oh, I'm sorry,
yes.
Councilmember Honzak, you had your light.
Yeah, no, mine's slightly different topic, so if you
Okay.
wanted to go on the same topic, then.
I'll just say, I think there's value in reviewing it. Situations change, and vacancy rates could change, for example. So I think that it's worth reviewing.
Okay. Councilmember Honzak.
Yeah, just a quick thing, since we're talking about language additions and changes here. Under stormwater fund fees, it says now it says, the revised version says to fund additional civil engineer. Personally, I would like to have it say something more like specialized civil engineer. I mean, that's very specific and prescriptive, but I think that's one of the things that I see as a gap. And this is not going to add revenue. But which everything else I think is focused on trying to improve our revenue situation. But anyway, I just want to make that note there so that our policy objectives are clear. I'd be curious if other folks agree with that.
I had originally written it very generally because I didn't know, and I think it's worth discussing, whether it's a full-time or a half-time or a civil engineer or a stormwater engineer or whatever. And whether it's focused on staff capacity or some other way of increasing our ability to deal with flood management efforts. So originally I'd written it broader, it's already narrower, so I'm not sure I'd want to go
Well,
narrower still.
personally, I'd rather see it broader, actually,
Okay,
than,
so we can go back to what it said in the
or
first place then.
specific to what I think is likely to be needed. But I'd rather see it go broader because I think the staff needs to figure out what's best.
And there, I understand there may be a staff recommendation, but I'm not sure everybody's heard it yet, so again, so that we can all talk about it.
Could I?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Gibson?
I would agree with the broader, I mean, I think that expanding the capacity with some staff is a way to improve and expand our ability to manage floodwaters. In other words, this is not about, I don't think it should be about funding the staff as much as it should be about doing the job that needs to be done, which would require, potentially would require a staff. So the staff is a means to the end. The end is to better manage our stormwater on public and private property.
One thing that I do want to remind my colleagues about is that this will not be our budget. This will be the future council's budget. So I know that we talked a lot about, I know Councilmember DeBala and I were kind of talking like we are towing this line of trying to make sure that we're not trying to commit future councils to doing things like raising a stormwater fee, because it's not going to be our budget. It's going to be the next council's budget to decide on whether or not they want to actually just the fee to pay for this, to meet that need. And so, you know, what we're talking about in this section really is what are some of the additional information that this council is considering would be beneficial for either those of us that are here or future council to have as part of the budget process to help them with making those decisions, as they ultimately are the ones that will have to make the final choice around, you know, what gets included and covered in a budget. Now, there are some pieces here, like the tax dupe, that would really, because of the timing of it, the tax duplication, would fall primarily under this staff with this council to do, because usually we start to get those state level numbers or rough estimates in the fall, like October, you know, again, the fall, and then they don't finalize it until the beginning of the year. But some of these other matters, like that stormwater fee adjustment and ultimately where it lands, is going to be up to the next council. City Manager DeSpirito.
Yes, thank you. I agree with your comment. And Councilmember Gibson, to your question or concern, of course, the reference to a position is, the rest of the sentence does say, to support, basically, in expansion of flood management efforts. So I think the goal, it was important, and you're right, it's important that we maintain some sense of why we're doing that,
Yes.
but the goal is there. And it's general, but, I mean, flood management efforts could encompass a lot of different things, but nevertheless, it is stated.
May I just follow up? So I guess the question is, do we need to reference a position here in this phrase? Or whether we could, to fund expansion of flood management efforts?
Well, I would add that the bottleneck for us is staff capacity. So if we're just being very transparent about it, and Mayor and Council have been very supportive with this coming fiscal year budget, that a recognition that having some more staff capacity
Right.
can help us utilize the grant funds and other fee revenue from stormwater towards these projects.
Yeah.
But that it's just being transparent about it. It's just
Okay.
saying that staff capacity will be part of the game changer to get more done.
Sounds good to me.
Which is why it said staff capacity in the first place.
rather than a specific position.
Just saying.
Councilmember DeValo.
Sorry. Which is why I wrote staff
I know,
capacity in the
I
first
know.
place, that's all.
It's okay. Councilmember Fulcher.
Trying to make words. So I think sort of like where Councilmember Hanzak was going, that it's really clear that a lot of these have to do with increasing revenue, but the stormwater fee will not increase. It'll increase a very specific type of revenue. And so just from my understanding, what are we asking staff to do here? Are we asking them to come up with, what the stormwater fund fee would have to be raised to in order to add another project, next budget season, so that the council can consider that? Because it's just not that clear to me how this is written, what we're asking for.
What I originally was thinking, may I?
Go ahead.
Was exactly that. If we want to do more work, we need, what's the bottleneck? The bottleneck is staff capacity. So how do we get more staff capacity? Let's look at what that would do to the fee. That bottom line, that's what I was, and I scribbled some numbers, and then I talked with Deputy City Manager Eubanks, and he scribbled some numbers, and they were a little different. and that's fine, because it was just like a 10-minute conversation. But that's the point. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
What additional stormwater revenue, as in fee, there would we need to cover the ability to do more work?
Okay.
Because right now it's designed only to cover what's required by the permit. And so when you start to talk about some of these other flood management, they're somewhat outside of that box, and they're not covered by the current estimates for stormwater fees. Budget, they're not covered by the stormwater budget at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, just checking lights. Okay. All right. So one last thing, not going to spend time talking about tax dupe, although Councilmember Gibson did bring to our attention that we didn't have parks on here. And the one last thing that I do just want to note is that there's a couple points where just wanted to make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of what we're asking the staff, the city manager, designated staff, in terms of reviewing special city policy concerning our capital improvement program, and just making sure that we're all on the same page, that what we're really trying to do is understand the policies behind the criteria for the vehicles and other equipment and the equipment placed for reserve, and the criteria for the road maintenance. Like, we're really just looking for information about the criteria and how will we know in terms of street maintenance or road maintenance where we are in terms of the number of streets that need to be maintained, and just understanding where we are as part of the budget process, making sure that that's available. Councilmember DeVal.
Yeah, on that one, just for me, I feel like I have a lot of information already, thank you, staff, on what the policies are, what the factors are that are considered, what discussion I think we still need to have as a full council, not just the working group, is whether that's what we still want to do, or do we want to change any of the factors to include this or leave out that, or staff might want to recommend changing something. During the budget discussion, we had some conversation about looking at increases in costs that's not built in. So it wasn't so much the information, it was the review it to see if we want to change it. And now maybe that's too in the weeds for the city manager, but that is what I was originally thinking.
I think you're making a good point, especially when it comes to the electrification of our fleet. we can't do it at the rate that we're putting into the equipment replacement reserve right now.
So I would like to ask, yes, go right ahead.
I was going to, and David, please correct me if I'm misstating anything, but with respect to the ERR, there is presently some, I guess, staff conversation, review of the criteria. There's a process in place right now with that one, is there not?
So for the, I guess from the staff perspective, the more concerning part of that bullet point is primarily the replacement of vehicles and reviewing that criteria. That was also a mandate, if I recall, from the last resolution. And so staff did spend quite a bit of time kind of reviewing that criteria and comparing it to best practices. From the staff perspective, we are currently including best practices in our review. And so I think from a staff standpoint, we have, and there were some recommendations at the margins for some changes, primarily to include all costs in our consideration. Right now, we were including annual costs and only the internal costs, not the external costs for repairing vehicles that were not repaired by our staff. And so there was not a full cost accounting, and at least in the evaluation that we were doing at that point in time. And so future replacement conversations will include external costs. And so that's a helpful inclusion. Beyond that, staff didn't have any changes that they thought would aid in our review of whether or not a vehicle and its condition is at the point where it should be replaced. I mean, right now, our assessment is that the criteria accurately describes at what point in time and what condition and at what cost we need to be replacing a vehicle. And if there's any additional review, it probably is not reviewed to be done by staff. It should be done by a third party because staff really don't have much more to opine.
So I could be wrong. Remind me when that got shared with full council and I must have missed it because some other people are shaking their heads, yes, like they know what you're talking about, and I'm not. So
I think it might have been in
It's just
the
the work
memo
of-
that
Mayor.
came from council members.
Thank you. Yeah, I think when the subcommittee looked at this, we were looking for ways to improve the process, especially in trying to see if there were, because of the age of these processes we had, whether there were opportunities to make changes that were going to save us some money. And I think we came away from both of these, first of all, the ERR, with the feeling that it was pretty well done. There's probably some areas for tweaking it, but in general, it was pretty scientific in the approach. There were some things that we can discuss if you want, but I think Mr. Eubanks has talked about them. And then with the street maintenance, we had similar feeling, except there was some impression that although the method is scientific, it has been in place for some time, and that street conditions are better now than they were at the time the process was implemented 20-some years ago, and that there was a feeling by the subcommittee that there was an opportunity for reevaluation of the amount of money that it would take per year to continue to maintain the roads in a good fashion. And again, the feeling is that because we were able to upgrade our road surfaces over the past 20-some years to where none of them are as degraded as they were at the beginning of that, that it should be easier to maintain them at that, and that the city just does not have the data at this point to make that determination. And so that's the recommendation with the street maintenance.
And thank you for saying that, Councilmember, because that is an evaluation that I think, again, just speaking from the staff perspective, is warranted and welcome.
Okay.
And so I think it would be helpful to clarify the language, because this does suggest that there's corrections or additions or changes to be made to the criteria, and I don't think that's what's being expressed. I think we're saying, are we contributing, or is our goal for funding the appropriate goal? And that should be looked into.
Okay, so,
Andrew.
and also, oh, sorry.
I was just going to tack on to that, because there is a distinction to be made talking about the criteria for replacing vehicles in the ERR versus ensuring that we have adequate funding for what our goals are with fleet replacement. So, and certainly electrification. And I think that should just be explicit, at least stated in the document.
Okay, so, it sounds like as far as what I was looking for, the vehicle replacement policies would get covered when in the first resolved, or is it the second? That the working group, we review the policy recommendations of the working group, then that's a good time to hear all this in a little more detail, rather than having it as a separate bullet. I'm not sure I understood that until just now.
I think it can be done that way, but I think it also, if there's going to need to be consensus from council around, for example, with the ERR, and we've said before, like, hey, we may need to start devoting more money regarding electrification, not necessarily just limited to the cost of electrifying our vehicle fleet, but also the charging infrastructure that we need in order to, so then that would mean that, you know, there would need to be a conversation about how will that work? You know, when will we start investing more in making sure that we're putting more monies aside for that to ultimately transpire? Similarly, with the road maintenance policy, if the idea is that, hey, staff would welcome looking at the policy, and so it's not about the criteria for identifying, but really more or less updating our policy to see how much money we need to start making sure that we're allocating annually based on the new structure, or based on what research has been done, making sure that we have the right amount of monies set aside in our budget towards street maintenance to ensure that our goal, let's say our goal is by 2030, every single street in the city of Tacoma Park is paved in gold. That means we need to have money. And figuring out how much money we want to make sure that we set aside annually, and what is that goal may be something useful for us to discuss.
And one other point I wanted to make, and I think it's been touched upon a little bit, but when we talk about, you know, tax revenue sources, the railroad and utility tax, vacant property, and commercial property tax rate, it would be helpful to have something a little bit similar to the next bullet point where we talk about tax duplication, just for clear guidance to staff. You know, what are council's goals related to those, you know, to our review of that? Is it merely the question of increasing revenue? And if we do increase revenue, what the potential impacts could be to each of those, to the recipients of those tax or the payers of those tax? So that would just be helpful, I think, to kind of flesh that out a little bit more, to give us a little bit clearer direction of which way, you know, how we want to conduct our review.
Okay.
Councilmember DeBala, you have a light.
No, sorry.
Okay. Councilmember Gibson.
I just wanted to follow up on Terry's note about the possibility that the condition of the streets has improved. And one of the things that I recall Director Braithwaite noting is that it has not been updated for climate factors. So there may be some criteria, there may be some value in looking at the criteria that that we don't have to do it every 20 years because we've done it well, or we may not, we could do it every 21 years. Also because the climate we've not had the freeze-thaw cycles like we've had in the past. So I just want to throw it out. There is potential to review that, although I totally agree that the main point had to do with the use of our, what funds we needed to apply there.
Great. All right. Okay, so I think we have a lot of marching orders on this one.
Not sure I got them all straight, but we can.
We'll debrief because I have chicken scratch, which will be helpful to kind of talk through. Thank you, City Manager Despirito. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to go back to the first bullet under the revenue section, where it talks about city fees to ensure that revenues cover the estimated cost of service delivery where feasible. I just wanted to have a brief discussion to just, I guess, establish for the record that, most cities, including this one, for, say, recreation fees, you're not necessarily going for 100% cost recovery, because to do so might create an equity issue in terms of lower income families, seniors, people on fixed incomes. And in fact, this city has always, Tacoma Park has always been sensitive to that, and we have scholarships for youth that need financial assistance to access our programs. But when we use language, it says where feasible. If that's part of what we mean by where feasible, that's fine. I want to just put it out there that perhaps that might be somewhat defined a little more clear if you want to make certain that folks don't think that, in every case, every fee is going to, we're going to go for a maximum cost recovery, and that where feasible might have more to do with logistics
Maybe
than
desired
policy.
is the right word.
I'm sorry?
I say maybe desired is the right word.
Yeah, whatever it is, I just want to make sure that at least I'm checking in with you all, that from a policy standpoint, you're still comfortable with there not being 100% cost recovery in every case, such as recreation, per council's policies, and that you're sensitive to those things. I just don't want the language to be eventually misinterpreted by others that, well, council just established a goal of 100% cost recovery in all cases. So that's just something to think about in terms of how you want to clarify that point.
Councilmember Gibson?
I don't know whether, whether this should be addressed, what city manager has suggested or not, or to just lay it out there. I was going back to to a couple other issues. But I want to, I don't want to take the time if we want to respond to the city manager on this point.
Councilmember Fulcher, did you want to respond to?
I just want to say that when we were speaking with Director Braithwaite about this issue, she felt that a lot of the inefficiency that used to exist within their permitting in the public works no longer exist due to better software and stuff and improvements like that. And so she thought that Public Works generally, or not even generally, she thinks that Public Works is in fact including staff time in an accurate way in the fees that they're charging already. And then we were cautioned by City Manager Spirito just that you can't go beyond covering the cost of a permit. The staff's time, you have to be within reason. You cannot be making a profit off of those fees.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember DeBala, did you have a comment on this point?
I just wanted to say that as a matter of policy, I had no intention of linking this to recreation fees. I was thinking more about other kinds of fees. Yeah.
It's just that the language just says city fees.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's right. That's just an element that might not have immediately come to mind, but but that certainly, unless we make a distinction, it would be in the same bucket.
Councilmember Honzak?
I was just going to suggest, if, to make it simple, we could just add to that line, and in consideration of equity, and leave that to interpretation, but that's just an editing adjustment. I do think, though, also the bullet number 2 there, this on stormwater fund fees, it is awkwardly placed here because, to me, this whole section is attempting to recapture revenue and that one is not what that one's about. So I don't have a good suggestion on where it needs to be moved, but it doesn't really functionally fit there. Because to me, this section of this resolution is trying to guide the staff to say, hey, let's explore ways we can generate more revenue for the city. That's not what this, yeah, anyway, we can think through that later.
Great, thank you. Okay, all right.
Did you have one?
No, I was just saying that maybe just reordering it so that the stormwater one falls at the end, or reordering it and giving it a little enter space between the rest of it might do it as well.
Yeah. Okay, Councilmember Gibson?
Yeah, I just wanted to address the edits that I gave on Monday, that some of them are in here and crossed off, some of them are not in here, but I'll just focus on the one item that which is at the bottom of the second page. Be it further resolved, the city council will work with the city manager and designate staff to support development. Actually, I had changed it, development and monitoring / use of performance measurement program. And why this is important is that most of these, well, these are revenue oriented. And I see that our performance measurement system, which our city manager has proposed or jointly proposed, is one of the few strategies to actually look at inefficiencies as opposed to adding revenue. So I thought it was pretty important to have that in there. I know it's in the budget, but I'd like to have, I think, some explicit public recognition that we will be working closely with the city manager to develop and use these performance measurement, this program or tools that are developed. So it got crossed off, but without discussion.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm happy to chat. So where I was a little confused about this language is what would be the role of council in developing this program? Like, this is once we put it in the budget, this then becomes a staff effort. We wouldn't be involved necessarily in developing it. It would be more or less staff, if we wanted an update on the status, providing us with an update on the status. Given the timing of the budget and the timing in which this project would occur, it didn't seem to me that FY26 would be the time in which we would ultimately, for the purpose of the budget, be able to leverage new measures for consideration for the budget, right? So if we have a contractor that we're going to work with that's ultimately going to be responsible for doing the performance measurement development work, and I'll be transparent, I do this on my day job, that takes time to do, to be able to work with the different offices to figure out how, what is it that they do, what are their workflows, what are some key indicators, how to make sure people are measuring it consistently, and get them to report. So by the time that happens, it's not like we're going to have a whole slate of measures for consideration while we are talking about the development of the 26 budget. It likely will happen a little after our budget probably closes out for 26. So that's why I really wasn't sure, one, what the city council, one, we've already included it in the budget. Two, what would be the council's role in development of the performance program, because I see that as a staff role. And three, would this information be available to inform the FY26 budget process, which is what this particular resolution is regarding. So I think that's the piece where I was getting you know, where I said,
can I
well, hey,
respond?
this is something that's a little different.
Yeah, well, the timing, I can't speak to the timing. I don't know how long it would take. It may be that there are 2 or 3 measures or that could be considered prior to budget time. More importantly, this is more than a technocratic issue. This is really a policy issue. There are all kinds of performance metrics, and the cities look at inputs, some just do inputs, what does it cost? Some outputs in terms of the cost per unit. Outcomes is another level. What do we want out of a performance measurement system? Now, some recommendations were previously provided with the work group, and particularly my research in terms of what GFOA has recommended. I'm just suggesting that this is not something that the city, the staff plots on our lap to accept or not. That I would want us to give, I guess, more of a back and forth in terms of what we would like to have our performance measurement system look like, because there are many choices to make. But again, I'm not sure about the timing. Again, what else are we doing? What else will the council be doing to look at efficiencies?
Can I just speak to the group, the working group? I mean, part of the reason that it was an appendix was because we did disagree about the role of the city council in guiding this process. And so I wasn't comfortable with including Councilmember Gibson's research as an official part of the report, because in my opinion, we have hired the city manager, and it is the city manager's job to then implement stuff like this. And I want to see the report, but I don't want to be, I don't find it to be appropriate that I'm part of this process of actually doing that work.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Honzak?
I guess I wasn't part of the working group, but I just wanted to share that I hear a philosophical difference here. Councilmember Gibson, I think that it sounds to me like your interest is in being very, very deeply involved and engaged as a council in the sort of day-to-day monitoring management of the performance management system, because you want it to produce the kinds of monitoring that various people would like to see. Yeah, that works for the city. And I personally, philosophically feel quite strongly that indeed we have hired a professional manager so that the council can be presented with professional advice on the types of metrics that are cutting edge and how that can be of benefit and service to us. And then it is our job to review that and respond, versus working back and forth with them constantly on kind of tweaking it and getting it right. And I guess that's how it reads to me, the way that it's written here. And so I think it's important that it doesn't sound like we're trying to sort of get our hands into that process in that way.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I don't mean to usurp or the role of the professional in this. I just know that there are policy implications that we need to ultimately approve of, and that recommendations with options would come to us, and then we I think as a council would take our role pretty importantly to review it and see that if it is something that we would want to change or modify, or that we accept it fully. But again, I don't mean to usurp the professional's role.
Sure.
I just think that there are policy implications of this that need to be considered.
Sure. Thank you. And the first policy action that the Mayor Council took, of course, was to include it in this new budget. That was a policy decision, and that was appreciated. I had recommended it. I think staff is looking forward to working on this together. The way to proceed into the new fiscal year is for us to, what we've literally funded is a consultant to work with us very closely at the ground level with the various departments in putting together what makes sense to us professionally to present to you. The mayor and council is a product, but yes, it will be reviewed. I mean, we would bring, the process is for staff to work, much like bringing a proposed budget, we'll bring a proposed performance measurement program. And at that point, we'll be happy to take feedback and any further direction from the mayor and council as a body before it would be, implemented into, say, a proposal for the next fiscal year. So the idea is for us to get moving on that fairly quickly after July 1st, or, frankly, we'll start to do some of the groundwork even sooner, knowing that it's been included in the budget. But we won't spend money before July 1st. But other than that, we can get it going. But it is a process, having gone through it several times in several cities, that does take some time to do it well on the staff side. We'll bring it forward. What we'll ultimately have, and just in terms of setting expectations a little bit, is my goal would be to bring to all of you, on behalf of the administration, a meaningful program for your consideration. It will be later in the year, which means that ultimately I'd love to have, we get some consensus on this and council blessing. And to the extent that the next budget, FY26, can reflect performance measurements and metrics as a template, it's still going to take another fiscal year to populate that with data, because it'll be literally just before I'm bringing a proposed budget to you that we'll ultimately, as a staff, have that feedback from you, and they say, okay, and I turn back to my staff and say, these are the tools that you can use. These are the metrics that we're going to be pursuing, and we'll begin to accumulate data and other information that will eventually be useful to us in a budget, from a budget standpoint. For FY26, which we'll start talking about this, I hope to propose a budget to you earlier than March, then it's going to be a case where we'll have that structure in place for the performance measurements and some consensus on that, but what we probably won't have is a year's worth of data, because we would have just decided on, what are all the various buckets, what are all the various questions, what are the various metrics, where we're going to begin to accumulate information. So it will really be the FY27 budget where we'll have the full benefit of these measures and these metrics with a year's worth of information that should, at that point, be very useful to you in helping to gauge, have your discussions and analyze the proposed budget.
Thank you. I mean, that makes absolute sense, and that's what I would expect, although I guess I had hoped that there would be some population in FY26, if not the full amount. But I totally accept that you're going to run with this, and you're going to inform us as soon as you can and get our
and there may be, I'll say cautiously, there may be some information, some level of data by the time we're through or into the work sessions, the budget reconciliation, that we've got a certain amount of information. If we've blessed the metrics maybe several months earlier, we could begin to, but I'd be cautious to really present, that for really full analysis, because you're just not going to have, a lot of what we do is seasonal. It's not even every month, and I'd be cautious about having partial information and trying to draw conclusions or heavy conclusions from those. It might give us some light indications and trends and things like that, but we will move forward in good faith to put this in place and roll it out. Normally, from the point at which you say go, it does take the better part of 2 years to really get to that point where you've got a meaningful tool, which means by meaningful, it's populated with a year's worth of information from the departments.
Okay, great. All right, seeing no more lights, I'm sorry, I lied to y'all. I thought I was gonna try to get us out of here by 10:30. But we will make some revisions to this and then bring it back before council next week. All right, thank you all so much. We're okay with leaving?
So moved.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Fulcher. Everybody have a good night.